We are live now.
خلينا لين ما يوصل عدد المشاركين تقريبا 200 وشوية ونبتدي.
تمام.
أعتقد نبتدي إذا معالي موجود.
Good morning, Dr. Masha.
Thank you.
I will put the video off and then wait for the conference to start.
Yeah. أخ سعيد معالي موجود؟
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام والرحمة. السلام عليكم.
واضح؟
نعم واضح.
تمام.
نبتدي معاليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. معالي الدكتور أحمد بلهول الفلاسي، وزير التربية والتعليم، رئيس مجلس إدارة المركز الإقليمي للبحوث. السيدة ستيفاني جناني، المديرة العامة المساعدة لشؤون التعليم، منظمة الأمم المتحدة والعلم والثقافة اليونسكو. السادة الخبراء المشاركين، السادة الحضور في بداية النسخة السادسة من المؤتمر الدولي للمركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي، يسرني أن أرحب بكم وتقدم بالشكر والتقدير لكل من حضر وشارك وتواجد معنا لنتشارك معا المعرفة والمنفعة حول موضوع يعتبر من المواضيع التي تحدد جودة مخرجات الأنظمة التعليمية بشكلها المتكامل، وهو التعليم العالي. فهنا وفي هذا المؤتمر سوف تعقد الجلسات ويتحاور الخبراء وتقدم الورش من أجل التناقش والتباحث حول إعادة تصميم مستقبل التعليم العالي. وأود أن أتقدم بجزيل الشكر لسمو الشيخ سلطان بن أحمد القاسمي، نائب حاكم إمارة الشارقة، نائب رئيس المجلس التنفيذي، رئيس مجلس الشارقة للإعلام، حفظه الله ورعاه، لرعايته الكريمة لمؤتمرنا هذا. السادة الحضور، يتميز عالمنا اليوم بالتغيرات السريعة في جميع المجالات الاقتصادية والبيئية والسياسية والتكنولوجية وغيرها، وهذه التغيرات تخلق لنا فرص وتحديات لأنظمة التعليم العالي، مما يتطلب منها التحول والتكيف للمواءمة مع هذه التغيرات والتطورات، مثل ظهور أنماط عمل جديدة والتطورات التكنولوجية والاتجاهات الديموغرافية وزيادة التنقل والهجرة والبيانات الضخمة والذكاء الاصطناعي والثورة الرقمية، ووصولاً إلى الميتافيرس. كل هذه العوامل دفعت وستدفع مؤسسات التعليم العالي لوضع سيناريوهات مختلفة للتعامل معها والإجابة على العديد من الأسئلة، مثل: هل سوف تتغير أشكال المؤسسات التعليمية عما نعرفه اليوم؟ هل سوف يتم إعادة تصميم طرق التعلم بهذه المؤسسات؟ هل سوف تتحول هذه المؤسسات من أنظمتها وبنيتها الحالية لتجد لها مكاناً في عالم الميتافيرس؟ هل سوف تتغير أشكال وأساليب حوكمة التعليم العالي؟ وغيرها من هذه الأسئلة التي نحاول تقديم بعض الإجابات لها في هذا المؤتمر. وفي بداية مؤتمر اليوم سوف تقدم لنا كلمات افتتاحية من قيادات تعليمية وتربوية لها باع في مجال التعليم، وخاصة التعليم العالي. من خلال كلماتهم سوف يعطوننا إضاءات سوف تضيف الكثير على مخرجات هذا المؤتمر والتوصيات الخاصة به. نبدأ أول هذه الكلمات مع معالي الدكتور أحمد بالهول الفلاسي، وزير التربية والتعليم بدولة الإمارات المتحدة، رئيس مجلس إدارة المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي. معاليه قد قاد قطاع التعليم العالي في الدولة منذ عام 2016، وأثمرت هذه القيادة العديد من الإنجازات، من أهمها استراتيجية المهارات المتقدمة والاستراتيجية الوطنية للتعليم العالي. فليتفضل معاليه مشكورا بتحديد رؤيته لنا. تفضل معاليك.
شكرا. السيدات والسادة الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أحييكم جميعا ويسعدني المشاركة في مؤتمركم هذا بعنوان إعادة تصميم مستقبل التعليم العالي، الذي يقوم تحت رعاية كريمة من سمو الشيخ سلطان بن أحمد القاسمي، نائب حاكم الشارقة، نائب رئيس المجلس التنفيذي، رئيس مجلس الإعلام، وبتنظيم من المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي. ملف حيوي وبالغ بالأهمية نناقشه على مدى يومين، وتضمن محاور رئيسية، وهي التعلم بلا حدود، والتحولات الرقمية، والحوكمة، والاعتماد، وأخيراً التعليم العالي ومهارات المستقبل للعمل وللحياة. جميعها معاً تعد ضمانة حقيقية لتشكيل مستقبل التعليم العالي بصورة ملبية للطموحات ومعززة للرؤى الوطنية، بما يحاكي التوجهات العالمية وجهود اليونسكو في مضمار تجويد أطر التعليم. مسؤوليتنا تأمين مستقبل مشرق لأجيالنا الحاضر والمستقبل، وتحديد هذا الهدف يعتمد على العمل والجهد الذي نقدمه اليوم. علينا الآن مضاعفة الجهود لحفظ مكانة الدولة ومكتسباتها. هذه المقولة لسيدي صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس الدولة حفظه الله، وهي تحمل بين ثناياها الكثير من الرؤى والأهداف والنظرة المستقبلية للدولة، من خلال تعزيز العمل في مختلف القطاعات وتطوير التعليم بشكل أولوي لدى القيادة الرشيدة، ونهجا وطنيا حرصا منهم على استدامة المنجزات ومواصلة خطط تقدم وصدارة. وهذا يستدعي منا تكثيف الجهود ومواصلة العمل الاستباقي لتجويد التعليم. إن إنجازاتنا تتقدم بمعدل متسارع، ومن المرجح أن تشهد السنوات ال50 المقبلة تحولات تفوق إنجازات البشرية على جميع الأصعدة، وسوف تتجاوز هذه التغيرات الجذرية القارات والشعوب والمجتمعات، وسوف تلمس كل جانب من جوانب حياتنا اليومية، من عملنا إلى قراراتنا وعلاقاتنا أيضا. هذه التغيرات هي كلها نتاج ثانوي للثورة الصناعية الرابعة. إننا نواجه اتجاهات وتحولات كبرى أدت إلى مواجهة النظم التعليمي لضغوط متعددة، وهي ضغوط تتطلب رؤى جديدة لمستقبل التعليم، من تحولات السوق والاضطراب الاقتصادي والهجرات واسعة النطاق وشيخوخة السكان والارتفاع الحتمي في مستوى الأتمتة. أما بالنسبة لمستقبل العمل والقوى العاملة فيظهر تحدي كبير. إن التقدم التكنولوجي في الذكاء الاصطناعي والأتمتة والروبوتات من شأنه أن يخلق وظائف جديدة، ولكنه سوف أيضا يحل محل العديد من العمالة البشرية. ومع استمرار الأتمتة والذكاء الاصطناعي في استبدال الأعمال البشرية، من المرجح أن يقوم الشباب ببناء هويات شخصية واجتماعية في غياب فرص عمل دائمة وموثوقة كافية. وستستمر أهمية نموذج الصناعي الحالي للتعليم في التضامن، ومن غير المرجح أن تتماشى العديد من المهارات التي يتم تطويرها اليوم مع تلك التي تتطلبها وظائف الغد، وسيصبح الكثير منها غير مواكب لسوق العمل. ستفرض هذه التحولات متطلبات إضافية على نظم التعليم والتدريب لزيادة الدعم المتاح لأولئك الذين يعانون مباشرة من هذه التحولات في سوق العمل. السيدات والسادة، لا شك أن التعليم يقف عند مفترق طرق، ولكننا لسنا متفرجون فقط. يجب علينا أن نشكل المستقبل باستمرار بأنفسنا. قد لا نكون قادرين على تحديد المشهد بدقة للسنوات 50 المقبلة، ولكن يمكننا بالتأكيد أن نلعب دورا في تشكيله، وسيمكننا النهج الاستباقي في صياغة المستقبل الذي نريده. وقد علمتنا التجربة أن تحقيق أهدافنا يتطلب تخطيطا وإعدادا استراتيجيا، فضلا عن خارطة طريق واضحة لتكييف التقنيات المتقدمة، والأهم من ذلك صنع المستقبل يتطلب منا إطلاق العنان لخيالنا وتجنب التقيد بأفكارنا. لقد أشارت مئوية الإمارات 2071 أن التعليم المتميز هو ركيزة أساسية في خارطة الطريق المستقبلية. المستقبل يعتمد على الإبحار نحو هذا التميز التعليمي، وينصب التركيز على العلوم والتكنولوجيا المتقدمة وعلوم الفضاء والهندسة والابتكار والعلوم الصحية، كما ينصب التركيز على اكتشاف مواهب الطلبة الفردية والتعرف عليها في وقت مبكر، وإنشاء مراكز لريادة الأعمال والابتكار ومراكز البحوث المتطورة. الأخوة والأخوات، تقع على عاتقنا مسؤولية طرح لكيفية بقاء التعلم البشري لضمان النمو والازدهار والتقدم الاجتماعي. يجب أن نطور المناهج الدراسية ونسقل قدراتنا على التفاعل والانخراط في المعرفة. نحن بحاجة إلى إعادة تصميم مناهجنا الدراسية لربط المجال المعرفي بمهارات حل المشكلات والابتكار والإبداع، وكذلك دمج تطوير التعلم الاجتماعي والعاطفي والتعلم عن الذات. مستقبل التعليم في أيدينا تشكيله وإعادة تصوره، وأصبح لزماً علينا أن نقرر إعطاء أنفسنا والأجيال القادمة الفرصة لاستخدام كل هذه التطورات لصالحنا. ولكن إذا أردنا الظفر بصدق الإنجاز علينا البدء الآن. شكراً والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا معاليك. نشكر معالي الدكتور أحمد بالهول الفلاسي على هذه الكلمة التي حملت الكثير من الرؤى والتوجهات، والتي سوف تحتاج منا تكثيف الجهود بشكل تعاوني حتى نتعامل مع المتغيرات المستقبلية الناتجة عن الثورة الصناعية الرابعة وأثارها على قطاع التعليم، والحاجة إلى تطوير وهو الذي يحتاج إلى تطوير بشكل يتواءم مع هذه المتغيرات. وأيضاً ركزت كلمة معالي على المجالات التي يجب التركيز عليها وتطويرها في التعليم حتى يتوائم مع المستقبل ويحقق الرؤى المستقبلية. شكراً معاليك. وتأتي الكلمة الثانية من السيدة ستيفاني جيناني، وهي المديرة العامة المساعدة لشؤون التعليم بمنظمة اليونسكو، والتي حرصت على التواجد معنا من خلال كلمة مسجلة لها بالرقم من ارتباطها حالياً بالمؤتمر العالي للطفولة المبكرة. وفي كلمتها سوف تعرفنا السيدة جيناني على إنجازات وتوجهات منظمة اليونسكو في مجال التعليم العالي.
I thank the Regional Center for Educational Planning for dedicating this 6th International Conference to the futures of higher education. Higher education actually has an increasingly strategic role to play in enhancing the capacities of societies to become more just, resilient, and sustainable. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed the vulnerability, the fragility of education systems, and at the same time their capacity to innovate and adapt. In higher education, economic strife, lack of access to technology, and isolation affected enrollment, studies, and research activities. This unprecedented disruption has brought the necessity of transformation to the forefront. UNESCO's Futures of Education initiative, which will inform this conference, set actually the ground for reflecting on how to forge a new social contract for education in order to reimagine, to reinvent our futures together. The Third World Conference on Higher Education in Barcelona last May put forward a roadmap to chart a future course oriented around the daunting challenges of sustainable development in these troubled times. For universities to fully play their role as institutions of learning, research, and service to society, they must continue to democratize access and knowledge. This entails a shift of paradigm, a shift in mindsets and policies to think in terms of cooperation, flexibility, and openness. Let me share a few reflections on priority areas going forward. Our starting point is that higher education is not a privilege. It's a right. It's a right and a public endeavor. As such, governments carry the responsibility to promote equal opportunities for women and men, for disadvantaged and marginalized groups, take into account that enrollment in higher education is set to double again the next 2 decades, and universities must be on the same front line. In the context of increasing digitization, it has also become critical to look deeper into digital credentials, including quality assurance and recognition of qualifications obtained through online means. The second imperative is to gear higher education study programs, research and outreach around the stakes of sustainable development. Without excluding specialization, this implies breaking out of silos to design true transdisciplinary programs that give students a more holistic understanding of global regional issues, whether they be around the clean energy, mitigating climate change, increasing food security, or actually managing biodiversity. The third imperative is to foster more regional and global exchange of knowledge in order to co-create solutions, building bridges to policy making. There are game changers here. Digital technologies carry the potential to multiply connections between research networks. Open science promotes the sharing of scientific data and wider collaboration on research that can bridge divides. UNESCO's Convention on the Recognition of Qualification Concerning Higher Education, the very first UN treaty in this field, was precisely designed to promote that, mobility and inter-university cooperation. It only requires 2 more ratifications to enter into force. Our Unitwin UNESCO Chairs program, we just marked the 30th anniversary this week, promotes knowledge sharing across 100 countries on a whole range of global regional issues. To sum up, higher education as an ethical and societal responsibility to improve well-being and to protect our shared planet. Ultimately, this is about strengthening the conditions for peace under severe threat today, unfortunately. We can build on the political momentum of the Transforming Education Summit in New York convened by the UN Secretary General last September. In their national statements of commitment, 40% of countries reference universities as spaces of innovation, experimentation and ideation. We must ensure that this spirit of learning and innovation is geared towards the common good, so that young generations gain the knowledge, skills and sense of engagement they need to build a better future together. I wish you an excellent and thought-provoking conference.
نشكر السيدة ستيفانيا على هذه الكلمة والتي ركزت فيها على أن دور التعليم العالي مهم جدا في تطوير المجتمعات، وأن أزمة كوفيد لم تكن أزمة فقط، إنما كانت فرصة للتعليم العالي لمواءمة هذه التغييرات ودفعها بشكل أكبر للابتكار والبحث والدراسات. ومبادرة المستقبل التعليم التي تقودها اليونسكو وضعت لتؤطر سيناريوهات مستقبل التعليم سواء على المستوى العام أو المستوى العالي، وكذلك ذكرت في كلمتها المجالات التي يجب التركيز عليها في مجال التعليم العالي من قبل اليونسكو وأيضا دول العالم. الأخوة والأخوات الأفاضل، أن المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي منذ إنشائه في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة وافتتاحه في تاريخ 17 أكتوبر 2003 ليكون مركزاً إقليمياً يخدم دول مجلس التعاون والعالم العربي في بناء القدرات الإقليمية في مجال التخطيط التربوي الحديث وتيسير الانتفاع بالمعلومات المتعلقة بالتخطيط التربوي وإدارته في البلدان الأخرى، وإنتاج ونشر المعرفة الداعمة لسياسات التعليم وممكنة لتخطيط النظم التعليمية وتقديم الدعم الفني لدول الإقليم بالشراكة مع منظمة اليونسكو والشركاء الاستراتيجيين في المنطقة ضمن مبادرة التعليم 2030. تبنى المركز العديد من المشاريع والمبادرات والاستراتيجيات لنشر المعرفة الهادفة للتعريف بأرقى المستجدات والممارسات في مجال التعليم وإيجاد وسيلة فاعلة لنقل المعلومات التعليمية والتوجهات العالمية وتبادلها والمشاركة بها. والاطلاع على أفضل الخبرات وآخر المستجدات، بما يساعد المختصين والمهتمين بمجال التعليم على التعرف على هذه المستجدات، مما يسهم في تطوير معارفهم ومهاراتهم، والتي سوف تعود بشكل إيجابي على تطوير أنظمتنا التعليمية. من هذا المنطلق يأتي تنظيم مؤتمرنا اليوم حول إعادة تصميم مستقبل التعليم العالي، والذي يشارك فيه 20 خبير من دول مختلفة ومنظمات عالمية مختلفة، يثرون معرفتنا بخبراتهم من خلال العديد من الجلسات والحلقات النقاشية وورش العمل، والتي تستمر لمدة يومين، والتي سوف نبدأها بجلسة عامة حول سيناريوهات مستقبل التعليم، استكشاف الفرص والتحديات، يحاور فيها معالي الدكتور عبد السلام الجوفي مستشار مكتب التربية العربي، الدكتورة هيليغي فاتل، فليتفضلا مشكورا. تفضل دكتور عبد السلام.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذة مهرة، والتهنئة الخالصة لك شخصيا والمركز، والشكر الجزيل لمعالي الوزير، وأيضا يعني لحكومة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على دعمها للمركز الذي أصبح منارة علمية نفاخر بها في المنطقة العربية وفي دول الخليج على وجه الخصوص. إجمالا يعني أعتقد بأن كلمة معالي الوزير والسيدة ستيفانيا وأيضا مقدمتك الرائعة قد وفرت لنا الفرصة يعني لكي لا نتحدث طويلا باعتبار أن الوقت المتاح لنا محدد، لكن أقول بأنه حديث معالي الوزير والذي ركز على عدد من الفرص وعدد من التحديات، وخاصة في ظل يعني خطط التنمية وخطط أيضا دولة الإمارات في 2071، وأيضا حديثها على الأولويات، وفي نفس الوقت أيضا ما تحدثت بها السيدة ستيفانيا حول موضوع التحديات وأيضا العولمة وموضوع أيضا البيئة وموضوع أيضا الجودة وموضوع سوق العمل. أنا أعتقد كل هذه عبارة عن بيئة مناسبة لنا ومنطلق لنا للمتحدثة الأولى، وهي السيدة هيليغي فاتلاند. وفي الواقع السيدة هيليغي فاتلاند هي الأمين العام لاتحاد الجامعات العالمية وخبيرة دولية، ويمكن أن تخصصها في الأدب المقارن وأيضا إجادتها ل7 لغات وأيضا عملها في الأمانة وإيمانها أيضا بالجهد المشترك العالمي والوطني والإقليمي. كل هذا يؤهلها لأن تكون متحدثة متميزة في جلستنا اليوم، وكل هذا أيضا من خلال خبرتها الواسعة في التعليم العالي وفي اتحاد الجامعات العالمية وعلاقتها مع اليونسكو، أيضا انشغالها في موضوع مستقبل التعليم وأيضا في موضوع تحقيق الهدف الرابع. كل هذا يعني يجعلنا أكثر توقانا لنستمع إلى محاضرتها حول موضوع التعليم العالي واستكشاف الفرص والتحديات. أنا لأن سيرتها واسعة وخبرتها عالية، وبالتالي لن أطيل في الحديث حولها، لكن سنستمع إلى حديثها. سيدة هيليغي، معك تقريبا 15 إلى 17 دقيقة لعرضك، لأننا نريد أيضا أن نتيح فرصة للتساؤلات والأسئلة، وأرجو من المشاركين أن يكتبوا أسئلتهم على أيقونة Q&A. أيضا ننوه إلى أن هناك ترجمة، بالإمكان الضغط على أيقونة الترجمة للانتقال من العربية الإنجليزية أو الإنجليزية العربية. سيدة هيليغي، تفضلي سيدتي، المجال لك. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. Okay. It is a great honor for me to be here with you this morning on the occasion of the 6th conference organized by the RCEP, an international conference on a very important topic, as was said already by the previous speakers, on co-designing the future of higher education. I would like to start by thanking His Excellency Dr. Ahmad Belul Al-Falasi from the Ministry of Higher Education for the introductory notes, positioning the conversation on a very high level to envisage what future for quality higher education in order for our societies to transform better. I would like to also thank Dr. Maha Hilal Al-Mutaiwi, who is the director of the Regional Center for Educational Planning, for having invited me to this important event. And this will only be a keynote speech to launch the debate on what kind of scenarios can we envisage for the future of higher education. And I very much look forward to the many discussions that will take place in the following panel discussions and working groups, because there is a lot of expertise in the room. not only with the speakers, but also with the participants. And I believe that by having this conversation today, and as was said by His Excellency Dr. Ahmad Belhoul Al-Falasi, it's important to start to envisage a better future for higher education today and not wait any longer. So we're talking about co-designing the future of higher education. And this is also what Stefania Giannini said in her opening words. We need to transform the education sector in order for it to better respond to the needs of a society of today. So I will highlight a few challenges that we face that we all know, but still which shape the context in which higher education is positioning itself and operating. I will look at with you at the importance of education as a response to the challenges that we face, then go on and focus more on the importance of higher education itself in a very complex landscape with very big tensions on what is expected from the sector. Also look at how to develop quality higher education together around the world so that we provide for higher education for the many. We know that we have more than 250 million students today registered in higher education, and many more to come. And this is both a challenge and an opportunity, and how then the sector can adapt, as was again said by the Minister for Education, in order to better respond to the big challenges that we face, and as was also said by Dr. Maha, the Director of RCEP. So we have a lot here, and I will certainly not touch on everything, but I would like to share a PowerPoint to provide for a few insights and launch the discussion on where this could go. So I've been invited to talk to a very important topic, future scenarios for higher education, and using the opportunities that are out there, and also address the challenges that are those that are in front of us. But future scenarios for higher education is a very big topic that is not an easy one to address just like that, as you know. So there is a lot that's been happening over the past few years, and in particular by UNESCO and the UN. And some of the initiatives that are the backdrop of my presentation here are those that you see on the screen. There has been a UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development in 2021. It was organized in Berlin as well online. The recordings are available. And this was a very important conference as it set the stage for education for sustainable development in its broadest sense. It was not only addressing Agenda 2030, but also focusing and zooming in more specifically on what it means to transform the education sector in order to better address the sustainable development questions that are those that the education sector is to address. Then UNESCO started the Futures of Education initiative, which resulted in the publication of a very important report, which is now the basis for the roadmaps that we have in front of us, and that we can use in co-design and reshape in order to actually transform the education systems with an S, as was also indicated in the title of this very conference, and look at how the future is to be envisaged. This led then to the UNESCO Third World Higher Education Conference that took place in Barcelona in 2022. There as well, recordings are available, and a lot is to be found online, and good for everyone to actually look at, because a lot of the debates there can fuel conversation and can continue to fuel conversations on where the sector is to transform. Following up on that, the UN called for a Transforming Education Summit, which was met with a pre-summit in Paris in June and resulted in a summit in New York in September on the fringes of the UNGA. So all those conversations are part of what I will present today. The response of the International Association of Universities, an NGO with associate status to UNESCO, created in 1950. And we always work with UNESCO, and certainly when it comes to higher education, we have provided for a series of responses to these dynamics and engaged with them. So we created a series of initiatives, not only publications, but also participated in the many events that took place, sat on committees, advisory boards, in order to also participate in the conversations on how to re-envisage education and higher education for the future. So here you find a few links. I hope that the presentation will be shared later. But we started with a book that was celebrating 70 years of the International Association of Universities, The Promise of Higher Education, a book with a collection of 65 essays from around the world looking at what is it that higher education actually promises, and how are we today to look at what these promises hold for us for the future, and how to transform what needs to be transformed. We also had a strong contribution to the WEC 2022, and you will find many of the sessions that we organized to look at the leadership. What is the leadership's role in transforming the universities for the better? And how do they do that together with the many stakeholders inside the institution? We also created a series of webinars, 60 in total, on the future of higher education, inviting the many voices from the 5 continents from around the world to come together and each time tackle a specific issue pertaining to the higher education sector and where to go. Those are available online also to fuel the conversations. And recently, 2-3 weeks ago, we held the IAU 16th General Conference on Relevance and Value of Higher Education to Future Society. And there as well, it is directly linked to the conversations that we've had here, that we will have here today. So to set the stage a bit further, let's look at some of the global challenges that we are facing. These can also be turned into opportunities, sometimes not easy to see, but we know what is in front of us, and this is not new to any of you listening. We know we have identified the Sustainable Development Goals, and that among those, climate change, the loss of biodiversity are direct threats to the future of our world. So yes, we have on the one hand an opportunity to transform education, but they need in their transformation to really look as well as how they address the global goals, and will help look at that through the lenses of teaching and learning, research, community engagement, from the local to the global and from the global to the local, so that we really work together more. Stefania Giannini said it as well. We need more cooperation. We need to see how we develop and co-design education that will be really connecting the dots around the world. There's a huge impact of COVID-19. It has precipitated transformation of education at large, higher education in particular. It's moved and pivoted much of what we do online. And that was all fine, but now we have to look at what that means and how we are to transform the world of education and higher education specifically to respond to future crises as well, and how to ensure that education never stops, and also maximize on the challenges we faced on the way, and then look at the opportunities ahead. All of this has generated not further solidarity, what could have been the case. We saw that solving the issues coming with COVID-19 could have come with much more cooperation, exchange around the world. But we see, on the other hand, emerging global insecurity as never before, armed conflicts as never before, rising inequalities at all levels, including income inequalities. And we see an overall decline of democracy, which is quite surprising in a way, or it is not surprising, depending on how we look at it. But it is true that the situation that arose around COVID-19 could have also led to the opposite: more cooperation, more openness, more exchange, and more understanding of this need for working together in the future. So let's see what role education plays in that, because these tensions are tensions inside institutions, inside countries, inside regions, and between countries and regions. And this affects cooperation and international engagement. And what we see is less collaboration, actually, at both the local, regional, or global levels. We see increased competition. We see a multiplication of efforts and waste of resources, a challenge to many of the values upon which to build quality higher education, including attacks to autonomy, academic freedom, ethics, integrity, and we see a fragmentation, isolation of research and education. And again, as said before, increased inequality. So this is quite doom and gloom, but this should be turned into opportunities in order for the world to be in a better place as soon as possible. Education is the answer. We have to really work on a better kind of education, from basic education to higher education and even to lifelong learning. And how we will do that is something that we have to envisage together. As Stefania recalled it as well, the Futures of Education initiative resulted in a publication, Reimagining Our Future Together, a new social contract for education. And this report is the backdrop of much of the work that's being done at UNESCO level, trickles down into new dynamics at national and regional levels. And the basic assumption that the report is based on is, and reaffirmation, is the fact that education is a human right, and education plays a key role also in promoting human rights. And these two dynamics, two sides of the same coin, are very important to consider when we look at where education is. And Stefania said it in her opening presentation as well. Education should be for the many. More people entering education and more opportunities there will be to actually develop the kind of critical thinking that is required to result in the opportunities that Dr. Ahmad Belhoul Al-Falazi was calling for. So there's a public nature of education that is very precious. We see a lot of commodification, privatization of education, but education is a common good, and it should be open and free for the many. It should allow everyone to actually tap on what, again, was called for, this opportunity to tap into the different skills, be proactive. What were the other words? To really look at the many imagination opportunities of the people, at the prosperity, the emotional knowledge. So education is really what is the tool actually that will allow to unleash much of that. So education is not a tool of gross national product. It is a collective act of co-creation and co-construction of a better world. Indeed, there is the strong need for this whole of system approach to education, and higher education is kind of the keystone upon which the rest can be built. So why is higher education so important? We see it very often as the research hub, but it is first and foremost an educational institution. The universities prepare for the labor market, yes, but not only. They prepare for life as active citizens in democratic societies. They ensure personal development for the public common good, not only for personal development and personal benefit, but really how that actually helps transform society at large. It allows to develop and foster the maintenance of a very broad and advanced knowledge base that will allow to connect those dots that we have to connect from the different parts of the world. This is something that Sjoerd Bergen, the former head higher education at the Council of Europe, has repeatedly indicated in many of his speeches around the world. And I wanted to cite him here. He just retired, but I think that this very clear and succinct way of looking at what higher education stands for is very important for us all to keep in mind when looking at these challenges and opportunities to look at future scenarios. So higher education landscape is a challenging one as well, because we see massification of higher education. And so how to address that, how to adjust our governance structures, the education system, the research opportunities, the community engagement capacity of universities in order to address this massive influx of the young generations, and not only, also different age groups into universities, and to really try and offer the best and highest quality of education in order for everyone to acquire not only skills, but also the competencies required to move into the future. We have enduring disparities, including of provision and delivery. Around the world, a university has the same name, but what we see behind it and what it stands for is very different. So we have to work together, not to homogenize and offer the same thing everywhere, No, but to really offer the kind of higher education that is needed at local level in order to address the local and global challenges together, and to really tailor to the needs of the education sector, society in locality. So there is digital transformation of higher education. Dr. Masha has mentioned it a few times as well, very important. We need to tap on those new opportunities, but also look at the risks. We should not use digital transformation to supplant what a university face-to-face has to offer. We have to have a balancing act there in order to offer the two together. So there are funding challenges to do the above, and a very complex accountability set of mechanisms that we have to look at. But beyond that, we also are looking at problems of recognition, problems of understanding of the systems and of the opportunities of the different systems around the world. So there are many mechanisms that have been put in place, also thanks with the support of UNESCO, for instance, on the qualification frameworks and how these work and how we can at least start conversations and see how we do that. We really have to see how we transform the recognition mechanisms in order for universities to have the opportunity to transform as they should in order to really provide for the best and highest possible quality of higher education. So there is a transformation of the overall landscape, regional dynamics that are very good, but they need to really always be connected and be in a dialogue. We have to avoid to fall in the trap of this 4E strategy, which is only looking at employability, excellence, but what excellence? Never well defined. Efficiency, efficacy, always going for the shorter term and the easiest, the fastest, and not look at the time that is needed to provide for quality education and entrepreneurship. These are very important, yes, but how do we actually provide for employability and excellence to be at the quality that it should? And efficiency, what does it mean? And let's be efficient by providing more time in order to ensure higher quality. And entrepreneurship, yes, but not if it is to impact negatively on the capacity of universities to really go to this other extra leg and develop the innovation, the experimentation, the multiple connections that a university has to offer to move us into the future. So universities indeed are unique institutions. They're different from any other institution. They cannot be measured to the same measurement levels as a business, for instance. And it can thus not be a narrow profit-focused system where education is actually only seen as a profitability sector in a global market. Universities exist, as you can read on the screen, in a different time, not the frenzy of productivism, entrepreneurship, immediate results, short-term profit making. The time is to cultivate doubt. I think doubt is very important, critical thinking, the opportunity to make mistakes, to start over, to really experiment, what was said a few times already this way, to really lead to mature thought, to develop imagination, to address complexity, and to really thus trigger innovation. And again, I come back to this slide. Universities prepare not only for the labor market, but for life as active citizens in democratic societies. They ensure personal development for the common good. They develop and foster a broad-based, advanced knowledge base with the many voices of knowledge from around the world, knowledge from the Arab world, from the African world, from the Latin American, from the European, from the North American one, from the Asian one. So we need to connect the dots and understand how we all look at the world in which we live and how together we can co-create and co-design better answers to the future. This can only be done if we have value-based higher education based on ethics and integrity, equity, solidarity, cooperation, where we look at a responsibility of the universities towards all the communities that it serves. We need to really refocus on a true appreciation of diversity. We look at all of that in order to make sure together with the backdrop of academic freedom and institutional autonomy, where university leaders, together with staff, students, administration, can develop the kind of higher education that is needed in order to reach what we all actually are aiming at: quality in learning, research, and outreach.
3 minutes.
Can do this as well. Yes, I'm getting there. I'm almost to the end. I also would like to look at this notion of skills that is in all the different documents and presentations that we hear lately. Skills is one aspect. Skills is kind of tools. You can have a hammer and you can use it for many different things, but it doesn't provide you with the competencies to use it properly. It's the same with education. You need competencies. You need to understand the values upon which to build your education, the kind of attitudes that you are to actually develop in the students and in the staff and in everyone coming to a university, in order to develop the kind of skills that we need of autonomy, analytical and critical thinking, empathy, flexibility, cooperation, conflict resolutions. And then we can unleash also this potential of the knowledge and critical understanding of the individuals coming to the university. There are 250 million students. Welcome to the campuses around the world. This is many, and it's a challenge in itself, but it's also an opportunity, because universities thus have the most important active role to play in the development of this new social contract for and of education and for society. So future scenarios, 2 last slides, just to say that a future scenario can only be co-created. It needs to take all the above into consideration, as universities need to be trusted and supported internally and externally in order to transform and to perform. University needs to look critically at where they stand as far as teaching, research, community engagement is concerned. They need to look at where they want to go. They need to have a strategy. And that Dr. Ahmad Belul Al-Falazi said it as well many times. We need a strategy moving into the future. And that strategy we need to also already co-design and co-create, because we need to achieve a kind of transformation that will really tailor to the needs and the challenges at local level, and taking into consideration the global challenges we face. So we need to learn to change to become really transformative in effect. Thus, this means we need for a true systemic change that comes with roles and responsibilities to society at large. And to do this, we need higher education systems to be funded adequately in order to be able to deliver on their promise. So future scenarios will need to consider opportunities of the digital transformation, the new skills agenda, all the different things that already are on the table and that we will debate in this conference. But we need to develop the kind of teaching and learning that does come and go in the direction of a better usage of all the opportunities that come with the digital transformation. So we cannot have a world that will just transform to, again, abide to the 4 E's that we saw earlier, but really look at these other dynamics and offer opportunities, new sets of required skills to ensure this broad-based critical thinking competencies to develop new opportunities altogether. So it's only that way that higher education will be of high quality, that it will meet the needs of emergent industries, but also of all these industries that we don't know yet. The students will be those who will create and co-design a new future altogether. They will be together with all the stakeholders, and the ones including with staff, with students, with admin, with society at large, and with the many stakeholders in higher education. They will help co-design those spaces that are conducive to really positioning the individuals in their responsible roles to answer the global challenges we face. So we need to be connected, connecting all the education levels, connecting all the education systems around the world, and ensure that the future is one that we co-create together. I think I will leave it at that because the experts again are in the room, and the many following presentations will allow to dig deeper in these different dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great presentation. شكرا جزيلا. الحقيقة رحلة ممتعة قعدتنا فيها هيليجي، قعدتنا فيها إلى الحديث حول كثير من القضايا. هذه القضايا كانت تركزت حول موضوع التعليم العالي. تعريفه بفعل أن التعليم العالي والتعليم إجمالا هو عبارة عن فعل اجتماعي يتداخل فيه القضايا الاجتماعية مع القضايا التنموية، مع قضايا الاقتصاد، مع قضايا الفوارق الاجتماعية والفوارق التطور وفوارق الإمكانيات وفوارق العمل، وفي نفس الوقت هو عبارة عن عمل مستقبلي. ولأنه عمل مستقبلي يتحدث على موضوع العمل، موضوع المواطنة، موضوع الحقوق، موضوع أيضا الإنتاجية، وموضوع أيضا العيش المشترك وفي نفس الوقت الفهم المشترك. ولأن الموضوع هكذا قادتنا أيضا إلى رحلة حول الاتحاد العالمي للجامعات وبياناته واليونسكو وأعمالها والتغيرات الدولية وأهداف التنمية المستدامة، وفي نفس الوقت ركزت على موضوع الجامعة وموضوع أيضا كيف بالإمكان أن نحول هذه التحديات، سواء كانت التحديات التمويلية، التحديات الاجتماعية، تحديات التطورات المعرفية، تحديات إمكانية الجامعات، إلى كيف نحول هذه التحديات إلى فرص، ومن خلالها إلى سيناريوهات كيف بالإمكان أن تستفيد الجامعات في تطوير ذاتها وبعمل مستدام وبعمل كبير، وبحيث أيضا أن يكون هناك استفادة. وأيضا أشارت إلى يعني حديث معالي الوزير وإلى أيضا حديث السيد ستافينيا حول موضوع العمل الدولي المشترك، وحول موضوع أيضا التحديات المشتركة، وحول أيضا أن التعليم العالي ليس محصور على فعله ونتائجه الإيجابية أو السلبية على منطقة بحد ذاتها، ولكنه على المستوى العالمي. ومن هنا لابد من عملية اللي هو عملية التناغم وعملية التطوير المشترك وتطوير أيضا العمل المشترك. لن أطيل، لكن أيضا عندي ولأنه لا يوجد لدينا وقت كثير، لكن عندي مجموعة من الأسئلة التي حاولت أن ألتقطها. لدينا أكثر من 500 مشارك في الزوم وأيضا في اليوتيوب، وعدد كبير من الأسئلة وصلتني، لكن حاولت أن أختصرها في موضوعين. سيدتي الكريمة، ذكرتي على موضوع مبادرات المستقبل وأيضا ربطها بالتخطيط هل هناك خطة عملية تساعد الدول، وخاصة أنك ذكرتي بأن الجامعات وبأن تطوير الجامعات لا يمكن أن يكون في مكان يختلف عن مكان آخر، ولكن أيضا أن يكون على التردد. هل هناك خطة لدى اليونسكو أو لدى المنظمات العاملة أيضا لتقليل الفوارق، باعتبار أن المهارات والكفايات المطلوبة هي مطلوبة لسوق العمل والمجتمع والمستقبل؟ كيف بالإمكان أن نساعد أن نزيل الفوارق ما بين مستويات الجامعات المختلفة؟ هذا السؤال الأول. تفضلي سيدتي بدقيقتين.
Thank you for your summing up and very nice words, and also for this very important question. I also looked at the Q&R and thank the participants for the questions there. Yes, this is a collective effort. I don't think that UNESCO is to provide the answers. UNESCO is to provide for a frame, and I cannot speak for UNESCO, but I can only speak on what I see UNESCO plays in terms of a role, not only with the institutes like the RCEP or the IIEP or the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. I saw a colleague also already online. All the different institutes that you represent are that basis upon which these debates will be stimulated and the conversations will be continued in order to really together look at how to go design these futures with an S for the higher education systems. What UNESCO does is these normative documents that people can take and use and adapt and then translate in their localities. There's this need for looking at these documents, reading them, and that's why we need time. We need to take this document, the futures of education. I don't know if you can see it, not really. Reimagining our future together. We have to take that book It is not a long book, but it comes with real recipes on where do we need to put our attention in order to look forward. This is not a closed document. This is a document that we co-created with many experts from around the world. I sat on the advisory, I had the honor to sit on the advisory committee, and it was beautiful to see how did we look at education? What does it mean? What is the kind of education we need for the future? So there is no clear, this is what you have to do, this is the recipe. But we really have to look at, okay, what is the state of play? Where are we with our education systems? What works, what doesn't work? All the stakeholders need to be brought on board. We need to ask the staff, are they happy with what they do? Do they see they have a role to play? Do they understand how they can help their students to transform and become these citizens that will be those that Dr. Ahmed Belhoul Al-Falasi was calling for, these imaginative people with a passion for their life and where they can stand, where they can contribute to the world. So I think that, yes, all these conversations are very important. The one that you triggered today is essential. And it is very good to see so many people coming to this event, and then to really always organize space in the higher education sector for the conversations to happen. Not say we don't have time to do this, not have time to do that. We have to sit, we have to have meetings, we have to really look at these documents, read them, and see what it means in their locality. And I believe that what I showed at the very beginning of my presentation is the sequencing of events. There was a conference, a World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, that really showed in the different session what the different education systems can do to engage with Agenda 2030 and to really look at the Sustainable Development Goals and how universities can respond. Then there was the World Conference on Higher Education with a roadmap that is one that now is calling for all the countries, the systems to look at that roadmap and what does it mean and how can we work on it. The test, same, a commitment by governments to say education matters. That's already very important. Not only education for pre-primary to basic education, but higher education matters. And not all governments are on the same page when it comes to higher education because it's very costly. But as Nelson Mandela said, you believe education is expensive, try ignorance, much more expensive. So we have to think about these dynamics and work together.
Thank you very much. The last question. آخر سؤال أنت ذكرتي موضوع غاية في الأهمية، التحول من المهارات إلى الكفاءات أو الكفايات. هل تقصدين بذلك بأننا نركز على القيم ونركز أيضا على المهارات القيمية أكثر من تركيزنا على مهارات العمل ومهارات الإنتاج مثل ما تدعو؟ وهل هذا هو جزء من الفلسفة التي تبناها اليونسكو؟ وهذا يقودنا أيضا إلى حوار قديم كان في الستينيات وفي السبعينيات من القرن الماضي حول موضوع ماهية التعليم ونواتج التعليم العالي. اليوم نسمع كثير على موضوع المهارات، لكننا سمعنا اليوم على موضوع الكفايات والتحول من المهارات إلى الكفايات. هل بالإمكان بدقيقة واحدة تخبرنا عن ما هذا، وأيضا تذكرنا مراجع بالإمكان المشاهدين والمشاركين أن يرجعوا إليها بدقيقة واحدة لو تكرمتي؟
Okay, all of that in a minute. Yes, no, we should not focus only on skills. That would be really, that's a danger moving into the future. We need very strong knowledge bases for everyone. So we need to understand engineering, technology, the humanities. We need a very strong knowledge base. On the basis of a very strong knowledge base, can we develop the skills and competencies required? So we need, for transdisciplinarity, we need to connect the disciplines within an institution. We need to offer problem-based learning to our students, and that will lead to the acquisition of the imagination that will allow to use the knowledge to actually address the challenges that we face. So skills comes as part of the knowledge creation, knowledge generation. So there's a lot of accumulation of knowledge within an institution. The professors take that, they can share it with the students can take it, they can have this co-creation of a better understanding of mathematics, physics, history, literature, arts, but they need to have a very strong basis of knowledge before they can go only to skills and competencies. You cannot do one without the other.
We didn't have enough time. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, it was great, and it was great presentation, very informative. We learned a lot, and I think, I mean, the aim of this conference not to find a reply to all questions, but sometimes to create questions. And this is the learning, and this is universities, and this is higher education, to create questions and to make ourselves to think and to rethink as well. So in the end of the session, I have to say thank you very much indeed, Helgi, for your very informative presentation, and looking to see you on other events in the region. And I think, I mean, there are plenty of questions. You can see them in Q&A, but they can find it in some of the literature you shared with us, and the links to the share with us. Thank you for RCEP. Thank you very much, I mean, for to give us this opportunity. And go to the next session. We took 5 minutes from the next session because they took for us 5 minutes from the previous in the opening session. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I look forward to the next conversations. I will stay on and listen very carefully. Thank you.
All of us will stay on. Thank you. Susan? Mohra?
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Salam. Susan, would you like me to take it over?
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Dr. May.
Great, will do. Thank you, Dr. Abdul Salam. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. May Al-Ta'i, and I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Emirates College for Advanced Education, a higher education institution aiming to inspire and empower a new generation of qualified national educators. It gives me great pleasure to be the moderator of today's first panel discussion on the transformation of the role of higher education in an increasingly global world. It is without doubt that investing in the future generation by preparing them with the skills and knowledge needed to face rapid changes is key to the progress of any nation. Countless studies have shown that education is the cornerstone that advances society. Educated people are proven to live longer, be happier, and cope better with the stresses of life. There is also no doubt that the role of higher education institutions have evolved over the past years. As per the Excellency Dr. Ahmed Bilbol mentioned, the UAE Senatorial 2071 plan encourages educational institutions to be incubators of entrepreneurship and innovation, and to be international research centers. Furthermore, global education calls for effective leadership and coordination now more than ever. Hence, such a platform as this international conference on co-designing the futures of higher education is essential. Together with me today is an esteemed level of panelists. Allow me to introduce them, please. Professor Benias is one of the key figures in higher education in UAE. He is currently the Director of Commission for Academic Accreditation, CAA, and the Director of National Qualification Center at the Ministry of Education. He is an educator, researcher, and current practitioner in various fields, including forensic examination, psychotherapy, clinical toxicology, in addition to his primary duties at the Ministry of Education. Dr. Benias holds professional rank at the College of Medicine, UAE University. He is also a consultant of a clinical toxicologist at the Emergency Medicine Department, Tuam Hospital. Welcome, Professor Benias. With us also is Dr. Edith Hammer. She is a program specialist at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. Her work strengthens lifelong learning opportunities for people worldwide through research, capacity building, network, and policy advice. Dr. Edith holds a doctorate in media and communication from the University of Vienna. During the last few years, Dr. Edith conducted prominent research on the promotion of lifelong learning in higher education sector. Before joining the Institute for Lifelong Learning at UNESCO in 2017, Dr. Edith Hammer worked in the university sector in institutional research strategy at the Postgraduate Center of the University of Vienna. Welcome, Dr. Edith. With us also is Dr. Lim Peng, Chair Professor of Learning Technologies and Innovation, Associate Dean at the Education University of Hong Kong. Over the last 2 decades, Dr. Lim has engaged major education stakeholders at the national and international levels as his research and development partners for enhancing equity, quality, efficiency in the education sector that enabled information and communication technologies. In addition to being a chair professor of learning technologies and innovation and an associate dean at the Education University of Hong Kong, Dr. Lim is a visiting professor at the UNESCO International Center for Higher Education Innovations. Welcome, Dr. Lim. Last but not least, we have with us Dr. Martha Birkel, Associate Dean of Assessment, Evaluation, and Analytics at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. Dr. Martha is a futuristic and innovative educator and an international student advocate. In her global presence in educational technology, Dr. Martha is giving better access to learners around the globe to education to enhance social and economic development. She has researched the use of ICTs for development in Ghana, Jamaica, Mexico, South Africa, and Brazil. Dr. Martha has taught face-to-face and online courses to undergraduate and postgraduate students in Canadian and other universities worldwide. Welcome, Dr. Martha. So as you can see, esteemed panelists, we have a very strategic topic to talk about today. Allow me to start by an introduction question to each of my respected panelists. So for the first question, if each of you could take 3 minutes to talk about what do you predict will be the most significant transformation in higher education in the next 10 years. Professor Benias, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, May, for the kind introduction, and thank you, UNESCO Regional, for the invitation. I think life is changing dramatically in many fronts. We are becoming a small world, global village, and the technology is changing our life. And as the godfather of artificial intelligence, Claude Shannon, who was an MIT mathematician and electrical engineer, said, there's going to be one day that human will be following their device as dogs are following humans. So this is the situation right now, and the technology is going to make the education transnational across the globe, and the methodology of teaching will change. So if the universities are not going to catch with these changes, they will be left behind. The second concept is the integration of sciences. Different sciences were living in isolation, not talking to each other. And the good example is in medicine, for example, there were no scientific basis for medicine until Abraham Flexner, who was educational, came and added the depth into medical education. Then William Osler came and said, we have to have humanistic nature of medicine. So in every single field, there is going to be knowledge, there's going to be skills and competencies, but also attitude, responsibilities, and how the professions deal with. If the three are not tackled in different life, then it's going to be very difficult to prepare the future manpower. Also, for example, the technology is invading all the sciences. Previously, who can imagine that geography will be based on geoscience, music will be based on physics? So the scientific principles is invading all the fields. We need to be cautious of how we are going to teach humanities. Likewise, we have to be cautious of how we are going to teach the sciences, because no engineer can work in a team without having the principles of ethics. And the good old days that the teaching was done purely for mental relaxation and for the purpose of enjoyment is gone. You go to the universities, there is expectation, of course, to enjoy the teaching and to have philosophical discussion, but also to prepare the generation for future development. The jobs are changing, new jobs are coming, and old jobs are disappearing. And if we do not have the capabilities and competencies within our graduates to fulfill the requirements of the new job market, the education will be left behind. So these are a couple of thoughts around what the future may have for us. And if we do not address all those at the same time, I know it's going to be difficult to tackle all this. We are going to have big challenges in the higher education field.
Thank you, Professor Benias. Dr. Edith, do you want to take it over from here?
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this significant event. Well, we need to see the current and expected future transformations in the higher education sector in light of the broader global trends, some of which have already been highlighted in the keynote by Hilje van Land. And I would like to highlight three of those challenges, particularly related to lifelong learning in the higher education sector. The first one is the major transformations in the world of work that we are observing. Labor markets will continue to change drastically due to digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, and this leads to new skills demands and also with the risk of large skills gaps that need to be addressed. And higher education institutions are predestined to provide learning opportunities for upskilling and reskilling for new professions and new labor markets that will arise. And to meet these demands, universities will have to make available alternative pathways to access higher education and to transfer between different programs and institutions. And also they will have to ensure flexible learning modalities. As a second point, I'd like to raise the issue of changing demographics. This will also have a major impact on higher education. Several regions and countries in the world are already confronted with aging populations, which will affect the understanding of who is a typical student. In some countries, universities are already confronted with decreasing enrollment rates among young cohorts of students. And on the other hand, we also, with larger cohorts of older people, we also are confronted with particular learning needs that need to be addressed, including people in post-retirement age. And the third issue I'd like to raise is the climate crisis, which is probably the largest threat to humanity today, and higher education also needs to make its contribution to combat the climate crisis. And as countries increase the efforts to move towards low and zero carbon-based economies, there will be more and more need for green skills development related to developing and sustaining green technologies. And as we have heard, also higher education is not only about skills development. So also when we talk about sustainability and addressing climate action, universities can also make their contribution to raise awareness, to build resilience, and to integrate green topics into curricula broadly. And addressing the climate crisis will also involve community engagement related to collaborative research on the causes and effects of climate change, together with communities, changing patterns of behavior and helping them to adapt to new living conditions. So while we need to acknowledge that higher education institutions are oriented towards providing high quality education to young cohorts of students and to conducting cutting-edge research, there is really an increasing demand for them to respond to their social responsibility and to their so-called third mission, which is nothing new. This has been around for decades, but I think has gained new momentum in light of those major transformations that we can see in the world today.
Thank you, Dr. Edith. Dr. Lim, you come from an information and communication technologies background. We know that digital transformation disrupted higher education in so many ways. COVID-19 have only accelerated this digital transformation. In 3 minutes, what do you think would be the most significant transformation that we see in higher education in the next 10 years?
Thank you very much indeed. I think I'll just probably like build upon what the other two panelists have said, and also your mention of the digital transformation. So, you know, it's like the first panelist spoke about ethics, well-being, and holistic development of our learners. Second one spoke about the changing demands of the workforce, changing demographics, and the climate crisis. So I would probably add 3 of my own. The first one is what you have actually brought up with respect to the digital transformation. The second one would be with respect to interinstitutional credit transfer and quality assurance. And the last one would be with respect to internship, residency programs, and industry partnerships. Right. So I would say that basically all this is being like built upon the notion of trying to achieve higher education, quality, equity, and efficiency. So with respect to digital transformation, we are really looking at the opportunities that are being provided by technologies for teaching and learning, as well as technology-enabled research. But of course, as what the previous speakers have like highlighted, with opportunities that come with risk and limitations and barriers as well. So we need to be aware of that. How do we build the digital competencies of the higher education workforce? How do we come up with digital related policies and infrastructure? How do we work with our industrial partners? And how do we provide digital learning support for students? Right. The second one, the interinstitutional credit transfers and quality assurance. I think we are beginning to see more and more of that within the last decade or so, and we would definitely be seeing much more of that in the next decade. So that being able to provide access to quality, because different institutions have different expertise, right? It provides diversity, it provides the opportunities, but of course that comes with the need for a strong quality assurance framework and mechanisms that have got to be in place with the institutions working together, right, to achieve that quality assurance process. The last one is with respect to, I think, internship residency programs and industry partnerships. The previous like panelists have spoke about the changing demands of the workforce. I think you would begin to see more and more of the residency programs, a lot of learning by doing, the better integration of the programs within industry and organizations. And we would also be seeing more of a more robust and sustainable industry partnerships, right? So this would be probably my 3 contributions to the discussion, and I'll pass it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lim. Dr. Martha, being the innovative educator you are and being futuristic when it comes to education, what are the most significant transformations you expect to happen with higher education in the next 10 years?
Thank you so much. Thank you again for the invitations. Thank you to His Majesty for this fantastic 6th conference. And I would like to be a little bit more bold to what my predecessors have said. I think this is not the time to start thinking inwards towards the university, but we need to do inwards, but start thinking about how do we link with the community. So linking to the community, being relevant to the community, because we need to consider that industries around the world are developing their own universities already. Google, for example, LinkedIn, they're developing their own. I also think with regard to the oil industry is developing their own universities to provide the skills they need. And therefore the university needs to become relevant to those skills. So I will say one of the challenges is the relevancy, the other one is a community oriented, and the other one is linked to industry. And this is a little bit provocative, but people have, and the literature already has started to think about the disappearance of those degrees that are not really relevant to industry. And this can be very dramatic if we think about the humanities, if we think about music, if we think about all of those skills. However, on the other hand, we have also seen that it's very difficult for these graduates to find a job in the current world. Therefore, I think we need to, the university needs to focus more, and I'm a little bit more, in contradiction to one of the keynotes that was predecessor to this presentation. I think universities need to focus on the skills, on the real skills, in order to become labor productive and in order to become linked to industry needs. And finally, of course, I'm going to mention here taking advantage of the technology, taking advantage of artificial intelligence, taking advantage of linking to the databases and the data resources that we have. Students do not wait for the teacher or the faculty person to provide them information. They go and Google it. They go and search for the information. So how do we bring critical thinking to the university? How do we bring back critical approaches to the university context? Very important. Not only knowledge access, but also what happens within the university, within the thinking and the discussion of theoretical thinking.
Thank you, Dr. Martha. Professor Benias, I would like to ask you, as you see, the panelist here really spoke about the mix of the importance of looking at skills and the importance of transferring credits across institutions. In your role at CAA and at the NQC, following all of this transformation that is happening in higher education, what changes are being reflected in the accreditation of higher education within the UAE?
Well, thank you very much. In fact, I'm in the middle of another conference, and the two topics that we are discussing, one is technology education and the other one is micro-credentials and credit transfer across different higher education institutions. I think that there are a couple of important factors that has been hindering the credit transfer. And in order to facilitate the credit transfer, we have to do a little bit of reality check. One of the challenges has been with institutions that accepting credits from other institutions, depending on the quality. And unless we have a proper high quality accreditation system that make sure there is minimum standards maintained across the board, it will be very difficult to do credit transfer. So this challenge has to be addressed by the accreditation agencies. The second challenge has been with the different higher education system, different educational system, and this is being resolved globally. UNESCO had the initiatives in Barcelona, I think a couple of months ago, and they tackled this issue very well, that if there is going to be branch campuses or universities are operating in different parts of the world, they have to get accreditation from home country and from the host country, but also there needs to be a system for accrediting online degrees, and this is coming. The other challenge is around the concept of transferring different modalities of learning into credit system, and this is being addressed very well. Particularly in UAE, we have very good experience at Commission for Academic Accreditation and the National Qualification Center. We have developed together a couple of position papers. One is credit transfer between different types of learning. Those who do the hands-on, they get credit towards university degree, and vice versa. Those who have theoretical, they can get credit towards part of the applied degrees, and plus more flexibility on the recognition of prior learning, and recently the micro-credentialing. So basically, having this robust quality assurance, plus at the same time developing policies around these areas, recognition of prior learning, micro-credentials, articulation of transfer between different methods of teaching will help. And of course, using technology and giving credits to online learning. Skills remains part of education that very difficult to sometimes quantify. But there are, in various fields nowadays, skills are becoming more important, and hands-on education are probably more crucial than theoretical knowledge. And I speak of the health field. So nursing, for example, 50% of education occurs inside the hospital. If it's a 4-year degree, 2 years occurs inside the hospital. And that should be one of the futuristic approach, that even for business education, rather than 4 years being spent on the desk in a remote, nice campus across the village, it could be 2 years done at the university, or some of it online, and the rest of it could be done at the industry. And we have now experience with some apprenticeship in UAE that we are encouraging between higher education institutions and industry. So the learners will receive 2 degrees, the academic degree from universities and the certificate of training from the industry, and it's 50-50. So these are some of the approaches that I think will be helpful.
Thank you, Professor Banias. Dr. Edith, we talk about micro-credentials, continuous learning, and recognition of prior learning. All of this is to really encourage lifelong learning. And we know that whatever knowledge we take in universities, etc., is not enough. We have to continuously develop and upskill and reskill ourselves as necessary. How will changes in higher education support lifelong learning systems, in your opinion?
Well, let me just review the concept of lifelong learning as we define it at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. Lifelong learning refers to learning of people of all ages and of all backgrounds. It includes all levels of education, from early childhood to higher education, but also beyond adult education and community education, taking place in different learning contexts, both formal, non-formal, and informal. Importantly, building pathways between those different environments of learning, and including a broad variety of learning purposes, not limited to skills, but also for many other purposes, including leisure. And such a holistic concept is also relevant to the higher education sector, and the sector can make a concrete contribution to it. The important point has been made today at various stages already, that higher education is not only about skills development. Professor Berkel has also emphasized the importance of critical thinking, but also active citizenship, and many other ethical values are important aims of higher education. And I would like to highlight 2 points of how higher education can contribute to building lifelong learning systems. First, the issue of flexible learning pathways. To include wider parts of society in higher education and lifelong learning, it is crucial to offer flexible learning pathways, and with that also the necessary information and guidance and support systems. Flexible learning pathways include articulation, foundation, bridging, and open access programs, which enable learners without traditional school leaving qualifications to access study at the tertiary level. And a study on flexible pathways in higher education, which was conducted by the UNESCO International Institute for Education Planning, which was published earlier this year, found a lack of policies for the recognition of prior learning and credit transfer in many countries. And this also shows that there is a need for higher education systems to develop capacity for recognition of non-formal and informal learning, including learning that is acquired at work and in other contexts. And the second point I'd like to make is the role of universities in building learning cities. the concept of learning cities has been an effective way to implement lifelong learning at the local level, and URL has strongly promoted this concept through its UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, which today counts almost 300 cities around the world. And in many cities, we can see that universities have been partners and sometimes even initiators of the learning city development. And this is usually achieved through building strong partnerships between universities, city governments, but also schools, the private sector, and community groups, and developing a learning city strategy based on a particular social, economic, and environmental challenges and the learning needs that cities have can be a very vital way to bring lifelong learning to the local levels. And universities, as traditional hubs of knowledge production and research, really have a vast potential to promote lifelong learning at the local level through such an approach as learning cities.
Very true, Dr. Edith. Dr. Martha, I wanted to build on a point which Dr. Edith was talking about flexible learning pathways and the role of universities in developing learning cities. So what sort of policies should be revised to ensure that higher education institutions can adapt to changing individual and societal needs? You mentioned that the industry started creating universities themselves. So what do you feel higher education institutions can do in terms of policies to foster this kind of movement?
Thank you so much, Dr. Altai, for your question and for coordinating this panel. I think this question that you're asking is very important because I believe that the understanding of the university as the only knowledge holder in the world, of the different universities, that concept has disappeared already, or it is melting in other productions of knowledge and in other production of knowledge that is acquired or that is rescued by the industry and by the student or the learner, him or herself. So with this regard, the other needs of the community, for example, the needs to become sustainable, very important in our times, to become relevant to industry, as I was saying, and also to become individualized providers of knowledge. In other words, we have a multiple learner with multiple needs, with different knowledge capabilities, and therefore we need to supply this knowledge, or we need to share this knowledge in an individualized form, arriving to the learner in that particular time with that particular knowledge need. I see it all the time because I teach, as you know, I am a professor at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. Actually, it's 2:30 a.m. for me. And I see it all the time in the Faculty of Medicine, when new concepts, new strategies to treat the patients, when we are producing new students with different needs, totally different needs of the previous generation. And therefore, we need to be more focused on the skills needed, on the, again, individualized learning, individualized self-learning as well, promoting capabilities of learning for each one of them. I don't know if I answered your question, Dr. Altai, or I brought some other issues that I thought were very important.
No, thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Martha, and we will build on this conversation as we go forward for sure. Dr. Lim, we talked about lifelong learning, we talked about the role of higher education institutions, and we strongly believe that the technologies can really enable the diffusion of knowledge, not only the dissemination of knowledge, but also provide accessible learning opportunities to all. So what reconfigurations in terms of technology do you envision will take place within higher education? And what would that mean for individuals and societies?
All right, thank you for the question. I think just trying to pick up what like Martha have said is like 2:30 a.m. from where she is now, right? And one of the things that technologies have done is to like make us work across time zones. So she's probably up now doing this particular panel, and then she will probably be at her university meeting and classes later on in the morning. So that would be probably one of the key impacts. But like that said, I think the as what the moderator of the panel have said, the COVID-19 pandemic and the physical closure of universities, it actually make us rethink how teaching and learning could be done in higher education, right? And I think you are beginning to see more institutions exploring the opportunities of online and blended teaching and learning, right? And it's probably going to be a mainstay. And it would always be trying to address the issue of how could that enhance the quality of the teaching and learning within our programs and within our courses. How and will it actually affect the equity issue? And of course, the efficiency part in terms of the external efficiency, will it be meeting up to the demands or the changing demands of the industry, right? Would it promote lifelong learning? And of course, internal efficiency in terms of cost effectiveness of doing so, right? So I would probably envision that the online blended teaching and learning is going to be a mainstay within the higher education institutions, right? But that would mean that for individuals and institutions, there will be a need to really think about the students and the students' needs, right? So when the students are actually moving online, we could not assume that they are able to manage or they are able to monitor and manage their own learning. So again, what type of support do we provide them? Especially those students from marginalized communities, right? May it be due to geographical locations, may it be due to special needs, may it be due to gender or ethnic minorities, etc. Right? How do we provide them with the support? But of course, at the institutional level, there's also the issue of policies, right? Technology-based policies in terms of technology support, infrastructure, hardware, as well as software, like the learning management system, etc., that needs to be brought into consideration. So I hope I responded to your first question.
Yes, Dr. Lim, thank you. I'd like to actually connect what Dr. Lim was saying with Dr. Edith. So Dr. Edith, if we're talking about lifelong learning, what are the new models of learning and teaching in higher education that you envision? We know that technology facilitated lifelong learning, and we'd like to build on technology capabilities. But in your opinion, what new models of learning and teaching will be introduced in higher education?
Well, as we've heard already today, there is a trend of massification and also of increasing diversity of students in higher education. This includes students who wish to study part-time and who have other obligations, who have diverse professional backgrounds, but also a higher diversity of life experience. And this requires certain flexibility in teaching and learning modes. And I would like to cite some of the results of a survey that was conducted cooperatively by the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and the International Association of Universities at the end of 2020. And we will actually, well, the results have been presented at several occasions, like the World Higher Education Conference, but we will publish the comprehensive survey report by the end of this year. And the survey is not representative of the global state of lifelong learning in higher education, but still it provides a quite unique set of data. And in the survey, we asked the participating institutions to indicate the modes of offers, how they offer degree and non-degree programs at their institutions. And particularly for those traditional degree programs, bachelor, master, doctoral studies, we could see that the dominant type of provision is still campus-based and full-time. So there is still room for being more flexible in the offer. And we can see at the same time that for smaller degree programs like diploma and certificate courses, there is already more flexibility. Part-time options are offered, blended learning and distance learning is offered, particularly among institutions, distance universities, open universities. They are more flexible from their backgrounds. When it comes to technology enhanced learning, we saw from the responses that more than 80% said that they offer online lectures and seminars. We have to see this result in light of the already ongoing COVID-19 crisis at the time of the survey. So this has, of course, expanded the level of online provision quite a bit. But even there, we could not investigate this through the survey. What are the particular modes of online provision, and especially when we look at the Global South or at vulnerable groups of students, it will be interesting to see what is their access to technology, what kind of support mechanisms are offered, because it's not enough to just offer online provision. There also need to be the conditions for students to participate in these offers. And well, also the increasing need of upskilling and reskilling that was mentioned before will prompt new teaching and learning models. These will have to be even more practice-oriented to ensure high employability and relevance for the labor market. So partnerships with industry representatives and also communities will be highly relevant to ensure that skills match the needs of the labor markets. And on the other hand, I'd like to underline that we need to dedicate ourselves to vulnerable groups and make sure that their needs are addressed. And as part of our comprehensive research project, we've also conducted case studies on community engagement with vulnerable groups. And for example, have investigated how universities are addressing the needs of prisoners for higher education, providing dedicated programs to those, but also to indigenous communities or rural communities, also applying new ways of teaching and learning in terms of open science and acknowledging multiple epistemologies, moving away from dominant Western concepts of knowledge production. So yeah, I think there are quite a few different arenas how teaching and learning models will have to change or will change.
Thank you, Dr. Edith. I'm going to come back to the community engagement and partnership part in the next 5 minutes. But for now, I'd like to also touch on the technology enhanced learning that Dr. Edith talked about. Dr. Martha, if you can talk to us about what will be the impact of technology and innovation in designing the future scenario for higher education?
Yes, thank you so much again for the question, Dr. Tai. Before arriving to technology or in parallel to technology, I would like to refer back to 3 of the 10 UN Millennium Goals, which Dr. Hammer was touching right now, which is poverty alleviation. So the university has a very important role in poverty alleviation, in helping the communities to develop the resources and the skills needed to overcome the poverty stages from which communities they are submitted and growing from there. And this is linked to the fact that Dr. Hammer was already saying, focusing our programs and our skills provisions in indigenous communities, in marginalized communities, in rural communities around the world. And if I link this to the idea of technology, I developed some research some years ago about a paper called Technology Has Forgotten Them, Women in Developing Countries and How Marginalized They Are by Technologies. So the use of technologies needs to be inclusive. And this is unfortunately the developers have already forgotten, have put in the back of their minds. We are already thinking about virtual reality for some scenarios. We are already thinking about artificial intelligence, when in a large group of communities around the world, the access to technology is not even possible. And if you remember correctly, it was Bill Gates, the one, and the team for MIT, the ones who developed the one technology per child in the 80s. This idea has been abandoned, and this idea is still very important. So how do you provide not only the technology, but the capability of using it? How do you train the faculty to use the technology? How do you train the rural communities, the indigenous communities to take advantage of this technology? And so I am closing my, my presentation. I'm closing this idea with, again, providing resources for poverty alleviation, for local development. And finally, I'm going to also add this important idea, which universities need to become trendy or appealing to students. And technology is a language that a large group of students is talking right now. So technology, the idea of, again, thinking about themselves only is obsolete. We need to think about the learner as our client, as our potential client who is going to benefit from the services that we can provide as universities and as higher education institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Martha, for really bringing up the importance of accessibility of technology and inclusivity. And it's true, we need to speak our students' language or the younger generation's language to appeal to all. Professor Banias, I'm going to take a step back and talk about the internationalization of higher education. How do you see that this will shape the future of the sector? And we all talk about the efforts need to go global and the partnerships and community, the importance of community engagement.
Thank you very much. Probably before that, I would like to comment briefly on the technology part. We started the discussion with saying that the technology is controlling our life. But at the same time, we have to look at certain professions that are high-risk professions. And in those programs and educations preparing for these professions, technology is an enabler that will facilitate learning, but it will not replace preparing the profession. Pilots, physicians, electrical engineers, unless they could do hundreds of simulations before they become pilot. It will augment their learning, but at the end of the day, they have to fly the plane. Otherwise, no one will jump into the plane to fly with them. Likewise with doctors, I mean, they can use technology and dissect human body, learn anatomy 100 times by technology, and do the robotic surgery. But unless they are there to do the final surgery, I don't think we are going to take our bodies to them. And likewise with electrical engineers, if they don't appreciate the high voltage, and they haven't seen it, they haven't experimented, it's going to be very difficult. So technology remains an enabler. We have to use it to the best of our benefit, to the underserved communities, to remote areas, to augment learning, but not to replace it. Internationalization, I think technology plays a big role in internationalization. The universities could use the available platform to reach to remote areas, different countries. So there could be a top-notch educator in one part of the world, and with the technology can benefit learners in another part of the world. Even at the university level, they can offer many of their courses via technology across the globe. But also the universities can collaborate more, and the accreditation system can play a big role in internationalization of education. And if we look at it recently, nowadays, there are more and more collaboration between accreditation agencies within different countries. So, and within different regions. And there is a concept of dual accreditation, cross-recognition of accreditation, that will support cross-recognition of credits and courses and programs an example for example, I could mention at the UAE Accreditation System Commission for Academic Accreditation, we have signed the dual accreditation with the RCEP. So that means the business school, not only in UAE, but across the globe, all of them, they have the same rigor, the same standard, the same learning outcomes. And this will help in internationalization, I think. The collaboration between accreditation agency and using technology, these are the two important key elements for internationalization of the learning system and education.
Thank you, Dr. Banias. And I think this is the perfect segue to Dr. Lim. Dr. Lim, Professor Banias spoke about the partnerships when it comes to accreditation. What role will cross-country research partnership play in the future of higher education?
Yep, thank you so much. Yeah, I think like when we are looking at cross-country research partnerships, you know, it's like we could think very much about internationalization and globalization, right? By bringing them like together, there's also the phrase of thinking global and acting local, right? So in terms of research partnerships, you are actually seeing more and more partnerships and networks being built, north-north, north-south, and south-south partnerships and the networks. I've been actually like involved in quite a range of them, from the north-south partnership, whereby we were looking at the education researchers from the more developed countries working with education researchers from the emerging countries, working on issues within those emerging countries, having a better understanding of that. At the same time, building the research capacity of the research team in that particular country itself, right? So we are beginning to see more and more of such internationalization and exchange schemes that actually facilitate that staff exchange, researcher exchange, whereby researchers from different countries are working together on a common issue or common problem. I would see that as we move forward, that would have quite a big impact in terms of the higher education. First, of course, enhancing the quality of research. I wouldn't say that it will always be expert and novice relationship. I would see all relationship as expert, novice, where there's a lot of exchanges and learning from each other, learning about each other's context, like localizing prototype for each other's context, which is really critical, leading to the global perspectiveness part. But I think it's besides enhancing the quality of research, I think there's also that improvement in the quality of teaching and learning, like say within institutions that are partnering in the research, being able to bring researchers and scholars from each side to be involved in some of the teaching and learning within courses and programs, which would definitely be able to improve that quality, right? In terms of especially like meeting the important 21st century learning outcomes of global perspectiveness, right? To be able to embrace that diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lim. Indeed, global education calls for effective leadership and coordination and partnership across countries. We have 2 minutes before the end of the session. I'd like to ask my panelists if there are any closing remarks that you would like to say before we conclude today's session.
I would like to take advantage of these minutes. I will only use half of it. I think you, and this is also a little provocative question, following up what Ping was saying before, Dr. Ping, I think the universities need to stop producing research that has no relevance in the community. I was part of the Canadian Association for Research and Research Funding, And I never ever supported research that has no impact in the community. We are beyond that. You know, we cannot support thinking only or thinking that doesn't have the impact in the community. So my last remark for this conference is think about the community, think about alleviation of poverty, think about gender equality, think about the UN Millennial Goals, plan your programs accordingly, plan your curriculum accordingly, and bring these ideas to the classroom to be discussed by the students who, by the way, Generation Z has become very sensible to the community needs. So we need to take advantage of that when we are planning the curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Martha. Wise words indeed. It's very important that we think of the community and the SDGs and to emphasize applied research that has impact on the community. Even us as the college, as we're developing programs, we're really looking at the classroom environment and how can we enhance the classroom environment and accordingly plan our research projects. Any other concluding words before we?
I think I will add to the same point that Dr. Martha mentioned, probably with a different opinion, that we agree that every research has to impact the society. But the timeline that this research will impact the society, it may impact in 1 year or it may impact in 100 years. Many of the recent discoveries that we are talking about right now are the results of not only 100 years of research that has been going on. There was, right now we are speaking of personalized medicine and all that. And the credit for personalized medicine is not only 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's almost 70 years ago and even more than that. It goes to the days of Gregory Mendel, who was experimenting on genetics, and Professor Kalhara at MIT 70 years ago. And if it was not for those basic science discoveries that at that time we may assume has no relevance to the society, we will not have all this in the technology in our hands. We do not have the personalized medicine. So sometimes research is like a seed that you can throw it, but the tree will come later. So we have to be cautious of that. But definitely it has to serve the society.
It offers, yes, the foundation, the basis for further discovery. Thank you, Dr. Benias. Thank you for the rich discussion, distinguished panelists. We have now reached the end of our panel. I would like to conclude with a quote by Albert Einstein, where he talked about education is not the learning of facts, but the training of minds to think. And today we really talked about the importance of critical thinking, values, principles, behaviors, curiosity. They still remain fundamental. It's universally agreed that schools and universities are places to learn. They are unquestionably homes for the mind, but they are so much more than this. As we have heard from today's panelists, educational institutions are places for testing ideas, conducting research, understanding and explaining trends, promoting and progressing knowledge. They are places that train our minds to think, and most importantly, they are environments that have the power to unite communities, harnessing support, inspiring action for current and future challenges. Now more than ever, we need these expertise. We need this humanizing experience. I would like to give special thanks to the RCEP and UNESCO for this opportunity. Once again, special thanks to the distinguished panelists and to you all for joining and tuning in. We hope you found today's session as valuable as we have experienced it ourselves and as beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Off to you, Susan. Yeah.
A big thank you to everyone for such an engaging panel discussion. I'd like to hand it over now to Dr. Hind, who will lead the next session.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Hind Tayer. I am the Director of Science, Technology, and Scientific Research Department at the Ministry of Education. I will be moderating this session, which is titled Higher Education and the Future Skills for Work and Life. So The higher education, or let's say the education workforce, is let's say it's a cornerstone of healthy growing society, and higher education institutions play a vital role in developing workforces that can meet the changing demands of global markets and life. In recent years, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, numerous changes have led to the drastic overhaul of jobs and life, including the need to cope with increasing uncertainties in the age of social media, climate change, and digitization. The current role of universities in preparing students for traditional and stable career paths in fields such as medicine, law, and engineering is now simply not enough. Universities must equip students with new skills aligned with job for life expectations and new age citizenship values like responsibilities, human dignity, and respect for life. These transformations introduce new challenges and opportunities for higher education that will be discussed and debated in today's panel. There are four main topics within this panel: technology and implementation of curriculum beyond 2030 at higher education institutions, designing curriculum to develop skills relevant for future work and life, the role of higher education in bridging current and future skills gap, and finally, new degrees, ensuring diplomas meet the needs of emerging industries. In this panel, we have four experts in their fields, and as for the structure of this panel, and unlike the previous panel, we are going to address each speaker followed by his or her presentation, and then allocate 5 minutes for questions. Then we move on to the next speaker and so forth. So please allow me to welcome our first speaker today, Dr. Stephen Vincent Lamson. He's Deputy Head of the Center for Educational Research and Innovation and a Senior Analyst at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. He leads work on digitization in education during the COVID-19 crisis. He holds a PhD in economics and a Master of Philosophy and a Grand École Diploma. He is going to take us through the first topic, which is the title Technology and Implementation of Curriculum Beyond 2030 at Higher Education Institutions. Dr. Stephen, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this very nice introduction and for the invitation. So what I'm going to do is actually to talk to you about one of the projects that we have at the OECD on how to actually prepare for the digital age and using technology or not, but also using technology. So let's start with what the skills are for our current times. Then I focus on two of them, creativity and critical thinking, and I will explain to you why. Show how this can actually be fostered with technology, or how people can struggle or not with that, and finish by addressing a few other ways of using a technology that perhaps were not possible during the pandemic crisis. So let's talk about the skills that are needed. So we've done some work on that, and one way that we did was really to relate it to innovation. And so we are actually using a survey, international survey of tertiary education graduates that work in companies, and then we ask them to report on the skill that they were actually using as part of their job. And this survey had two questions. One that was asking whether people were part of the innovation process themselves, and whether the company or organization was at the forefront of absorbing innovation. So when they said yes to those two questions, we said, oh, these people have a highly innovative job because they participate to innovation and in an organization that is innovative. And then we compared them to those who didn't say that. And here you have basically the ranking, so what it says is that the people who have these highly innovative jobs are 3 times as likely, 4 times as likely, 3.9 times as likely as the others to say that they have to come with new ideas and solutions as part of their job. So they have to need to be creative. They need to be able to have some critical thinking, communication skills, etc. And you can see here that, in fact, they have to use all the different skills that were tested more than the other ones. So one really important point out of that is, well, the importance of some other skills, but also the fact that, higher education is also about training for these different skills. I don't show you, they were also asked to rate the higher education programs. And here it was quite interesting, because what basically they were saying is that the mastery of their own field was really what came first, and then the analytical thinking was also very much developed. But in the case of creativity, that was actually not so great. And critical thinking was a bit better, or a bit more ambiguous. But basically, there is really some progress that can be made in that. So that's also something which is aligned with the demand of CEOs of big companies and HR directors. You can see that, creativity, innovation, analytical thinking, etc., are among the top skills that are needed. And this is particularly true, in a world where we believe computers will increasingly be able to do a lot of things that we human beings were doing before, so that's really one of the new challenges that we have. Good thing is that creativity is also something which is very positive for people, that's something that we like as human beings, gives a lot of positive emotions and has a lot of positive impacts. And critical thinking, in the current state of media literacy is also very important as a democratic or citizen skill as well. So based on that, the way that we think about what higher education systems and education systems more generally should be doing is continue to have the focus on knowledge, so what we've called the technical skills here, the know what and the know-how in different domains, but also actually put more emphasis on the social and emotional skills, like perseverance, communication, etc., regulation of one's emotions, but also on creativity and critical thinking and other higher order thinking skills. That's actually something that is consensual. If you look at the higher education policies in most countries, most of them are actually supporting this agenda. And so what the big question that we have is actually to know what it means in practice to do that, So what are the things that need to be changed to make this happen? The way we approached it was to actually try to work internationally to see what kind of language, what is it that we mean when we say critical thinking or when we say creativity in an educational setting. Try to actually develop examples of lesson plans, of syllabi, etc., to showcase what it looks like, look at the professional development plan that have to come with them, and also try to develop evaluation instruments to measure them. And actually, we're currently working with a company on a new assessment of undergraduate students on creativity and critical thinking that's just starting, and with a company called MACAT that is based in England. So we've been working with a network of higher education institutions from in 14 different countries. So here you have the names to actually see what it looks like to redesign teaching and learning in such a way that people learn about the domain and the discipline they should be learning about, but also that they actually have space to develop their creativity and their critical thinking. And this is something that's followed up on previous work we've been doing in primary and secondary education over 2 school years. And you can see we had a book that came out of that. One very important aspect of it is actually to develop rubrics. So have a simplified language to talk about what it is that we're talking about. And so here you can see, we've tried to simplify. We started from all the literature on that, try to simplify and in such a way that people can actually remember what we're talking about. And so, with simple steps, inquiring, imagining, doing, and reflecting. And then we have, descriptors of what creativity is about. Basically, there is a consensus that it's about trying to do something which is novel and appropriate to a certain problem. And critical thinking, which is more about making a decision, but in relation to alternative possibilities. And so here, I'm not going into the descriptor, but you can see, and we have actually developed a portfolio of rubrics in domains and in one such as this one, which is domain general. The way we ask faculty members to use a rubric is actually to step back and use it as a metacognitive tool to make them think of, in my lessons or my courses, when is it that I give the students the ability, the space to actually develop these different elements of either creativity or critical thinking. And so we ask them to map their lessons on, to divide them into different steps or subunits, and then to see when it is that they are actually trying to develop all these different things. We have developed another type of rubrics, which are assessment or scoring rubrics that we ask people to discuss, with the students, and where they can see when they do something that which is a student product, it can be an essay, performance, a tool or whatever. Then it can be assessed, or if the faculty members can actually see the whole learning process, and they can also actually assess and give feedback to students based on that. One of the important things with rubrics is that it actually makes the learning process and assessment process explicit, so we know what we are talking about. We know, so in principle, there should be a lot of descriptors. One of the difficulties is that, we want to assess a lot of different things, and usually speaking, and so we need actually to make it relatively simple. And so here, the idea is not that you just assess on creativity or critical thinking, but of course, the knowledge and some other aspects that you want, so that you have something which is handy that you can actually use afterward as an assessment tool. So let me give you one example of a lesson plan that was designed by actually one of our universities in England for that one. So it's a course on animal welfare, and so basically and how to deal with animals. So you can see, I'm not going to read them because you can read it much quicker than I do. On the left-hand side, what are the learning outcomes? Something which is a very important thing to always keep in mind. And then, because we wanted to have this emphasis on critical thinking and creativity, what are the things that in these two different elements that is going to be developed by the lesson? So here, it's a unit, it's a 12-week unit syllabi, and so here that's just one lesson. And so here, basically, what the students are asked to do is to work on remember some of the assessment frameworks that they have studied before, so if you do not know much about animal welfare, but apparently the 5 freedoms, 5 domains, and qualitative behavior assessment are kind of classical ways of thinking about that in this domain. And so basically they are asked to apply it to one specific animal, the meerkat, that they go and see, and to come up with a new framework of them, that will address all the different limitations of the different things that they've studied before, so that they have to exercise a little bit of their critical thinking about what these things have been, and come up with something new and appropriate, so that they also have to exercise a bit of their creativity, and then they have to review it. Then they actually look at what the working groups, and they look at what the other groups have been doing, and so they also have another chance to exercise their critical thinking and to know how to argue about it, So that's really one example of how you can do all these different things. Now let's go to technology. One, all these things have been done on the ground by all, the universities we've been working with. And unfortunately, it started at the same time as when the pandemic started as well. So that in fact, the universities we were working with had to move from the traditional face-to-face format. A few of them already had online, but to this kind of online environment. So what happened is basically that for many of them they went to fully online, or you can see mainly online. So there was a very strong online intensity as part of that, and we asked them what they've changed. So what they've changed is the delivery of what they were doing. For 90% of them, because as I said, a few courses were actually already designed for an online delivery. 65% actually adapted the pedagogical approach, and that's really something which is pretty important when you move to an online environment. But you can see the assessment and much less content and the learning goals of the course. So what did the students feel about it? Well, they preferred to have their in-person classes before and after, you know, because we were having a pre and post questionnaires for all faculty and all students participating in the project. And here, in terms of students, we're talking about 4,000, 5,000 students, you know, as part of that. However, I think the interesting aspect as well is that the students, even so they continue to prefer in presence after, you know, having experienced the online delivery, they actually felt that it worked not so bad. You know, you can see that all the posts in terms of motivation to learn and enjoyment of learning, the support that they received and how they felt their instructor was prepared was actually better than what they imagined when they started the semester. It was a bit more challenging for faculty. And so here you can see that, you know, there was almost no change with concurrent posts. So, you know, it's a non-significant change, except for the creativity. Well, that's where they found that it was much more challenging to do it in an online environment. But at the same time, you can see that over 70% still felt that it was possible to do, you know. And so, in fact, as part of the project, we have also adapted and reviewed how all these actually things can actually be done online through a series of, you know, pedagogical techniques, you know, that you can also try to foster online. We tend to associate, you know, a technology with online or hybrid learning, but what I would like to finish with is actually give you some ideas of some of the other technology that are coming and that actually can be integrated as part of an in-presence teaching and learning in higher education. So a lot of these things are actually, so I'm just going to scratch the surface, but, you know, are part of this digital education outlook that we published at the OECD and that I edited. One that I would like to start with is classroom analytics. So that's something which is pretty experimental. It's already experimented, so it's already there, you know, many of the things that we show. And basically what it does is that it transforms the classroom into a kind of a computer, you know, it's a smart classroom where you have sensors, cameras, or, you know, tools, which provide feedback to the teacher, either in real time, so that they can actually, let's say, move to another activity, or after the fact, you know, so that they would know where my students engage, how much time did I spend speaking compared to the students, where did I move in the classroom, etc. And so here you can see, you know, the first application is basically looking at how engaged some of the students are, you know, while you are doing your teaching. And so, for example, one of the techniques that some colleagues have developed is to check how the head of the students is moving, because in fact there is one mobile element in a classroom, usually speaking, and that's the teacher, you know, the faculty member. And so when the whole class follows, and actually there is kind of a level of engagement. On the bottom, you can see it's a tool that helps the students to regulate the length of their talking, you know. So here's a collaborative group, but where everyone is asked to actually, you know, contribute. So here you can see that, you know, the lady on the right hand bottom corner has spoken most. Perhaps she's the one who has, you know, presented what was supposed to be done, etc. But here, that's, you know, it's a kind of immediate feedback that you can get as part of, you know, the teaching and learning. Second aspect that I wanted to highlight is actually how assessments and exams can actually be reshaped thanks to technology. You know, we can have actually new types of assessment that build much more on authentic tasks, you know, based on simulations and games. And so here you have an example on that, a logistical problem or you know, a driving problem. You have also, in fact, if we continue to think about it in a more traditional way, you know, increasing reliability of machine rating for many of the essays, even so they can still be played easily, which is why they're not so important. But more importantly, you know, the more that we have data on what is going on, perhaps the less we will, at the end of the day, need to have exams, just because we can follow the progress of the students in a more granular way than what we were able to do before. And so we can actually develop predictive models that will help us to provide different pathways for them, you know, in terms of what, you know, they could actually do next, which initially is what, you know, many of the exams are made for. Last element I wanted to highlight is, you know, the use of digital credentials and how this also opens a lot of new possibilities. Well, in fact, it's one thing that is quite important to develop also, you know, as people get more and more mobile, you know, that makes it much easier for them. But the other thing is that it really allows to develop credentials for things which are much more granular than what we have than just a degree. Not that the degree will disappear, but, you know, we can have a multiplicity of other things, and that can only be handled with technology. So that's really one of the very important aspects. And of course, you know, the fact that they're verifiable, etc., mean that also the degree holders or the credential holders can also manage themselves, you know, their data. And so, in fact, diminish the pressure that is put on institutions in terms of, you know, stewardship of all these different degrees, etc., and actually possibly also increase the efficiency of the system. So those are some of the new things that are coming. Now, difficulties, of course, to change and to think about new ways of doing things, and that's one challenge that we see everywhere. And I think that one of the things that we have developed through, you know, the project I've presented is that, you know, you can actually build on a few pillars. First, be clear about what you want, you know, so have simple definitions about what it is that you want, not things that are too complex, making sure and try to create alignment, providing professional learning opportunities, so it can take, you know, the form of these teaching and learning centers that many universities have, but it also has to be a continuous effort. So, you know, develop professional learning communities. You need to give examples of practice, you know, so that's what we try to do, make it visible what it is that you're talking about so that people can see. And you need to give enough examples so that people who are at a different stage of the journey can actually relate to what is given. It shouldn't be too challenging, but it should be challenging, you know, to do that. Change your assessments. If you don't change your assessment criteria, nothing will happen, you know, so you have to follow and you have to reward people who try to develop all these different types of skills. And of course, what you need is to monitor what you're doing. So that's why we also try to develop instruments to evaluate these different things. The main things that we've learned, you know, that we hear over and over again, and that's what the faculty members have told us on the journey, is that what is the most challenging is time, you know, so having the time to change things, to prepare for all these different things, trying to, you know, do the old things in a new way. However, the good news is that time is always a challenge when you try to do things in a new way. And over time, the time pressure changes. And so that, in fact, you know, a lot of things that takes a lot of time at the beginning will eventually take much less. And so that's really, you know, I would say the encouraging message that we should have for people. So thank you very much for inviting and listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen, for a very insightful presentation. I want to comment on what you just said. The time is challenging to do new things, but I believe also the time would be a challenge also to adapt to the new things if it has been applied. So in that terms, like including this new technology in the curricula in higher education, if you can comment on the preparing the society or preparing the learners would require more time. Society in terms of parents, not just the society. Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree. You know, that's, I mean, when you want to change things, you know, there is a level of social acceptability, acceptance that has to be worked. Mm-hmm. And this is actually why we've been working in primary, secondary, and higher education, you know, because you also need to create some type of alignment, you know, across all these different levels. So in case of the students, so what we've seen, in fact, at the end, the students liked, you know, the new method that were proposed to them, but initially it was tough, you know, because that's not what they believe good teaching should look like, you know. They'd rather do the traditional thing that they were that actually made them successful in secondary education and brought them to higher education. So that's really one of the challenges. You have to, do things slowly in some ways, but you have to try to do them nonetheless, so that's part of the challenge.
I think, as you said, also like one part of the we should balance like going into the introducing the new technology and the teaching, and then the monitoring, or like in terms of cheating, and there are new things that is going to be encountered as well with the new technology introduced. There is also like when you mentioned, I believe, the pictures that you have shared when all the data is shared on the screen, maybe virtually. Don't you think that from a psychology perspective that will be affecting the students having more pressure? They cannot just jump in or think about something because would be a pop-up on the teacher's screen.
Yes, so it is interesting because in fact, a lot of studies are precisely about the effects, because sometimes it gives either an incentive to students to behave in a certain way, or so one of the things that many of the people working with this data work on, the type of dashboard that you can have is really important. So is it visible to all? Is it just visible to the teacher? Is it just visible to the students? And so that actually creates different types of behaviors. And usually that's really part of the design of these different tools,
Yes, and we will have this chapter of privacy information.
Absolutely. So that's another of the, so in a lot of the new things that, are coming, so like classroom analytics, I like this example because it's a creepy one, that's really the one where you have, you're not sure whether you really like it or not, that's, but it creates a lot of new challenges for privacy, data protection, and what we're willing to accept or not, and to what extent it's worth doing it, that's, but at the same time, it opens a lot of new opportunities. So I feel that we really have to really think about it.
Yes, I believe, like also the point you have mentioned, when there is more data about the students' behavior or the students' achievements on maybe study cases, maybe in metaverse, so they don't have to do the exams by the end of the day. Yes.
Yeah. So the one metaverse is also new, new possibilities. I haven't mentioned that, but you're right, that the example on simulations for assessments is one example of that. But it's true that there are a lot of new possibilities, especially for vocational and professional education, where you can do a lot of new things, So in fact, increasingly you have in medical science already a lot of applications, using the metaverse or augmented or virtual reality. Basically.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Stephen, for your time. We want to move on to our next speaker. Please welcome Dr. Kate Drzik-McNeil. She's the Vice President for the Curricular and Pedagogical Innovation and Executive Director of VALI, which is an institution at the Association of American Colleges and Universities. Dr. McNeil spent 10 years at Virginia Tech working in assessment and evaluation, as well as serving as affiliate faculty in Virginia Tech's graduate program in educational psychology, teaching courses on cognitive processes and effective college teaching. She received a Bachelor in Art from the University of Virginia, Master of Art in History from Providence College, Rhode Island, and a PhD in Educational Psychology from Virginia Tech. Today, Dr. McNeil takes us through her presentation titled Designing a Curriculum to Develop Skills Relevant for Future Work and Life. Dr. Kate, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Greetings from the East Coast of the United States. It's a little early here, so apologies. You may see me drinking coffee as we are discussing things today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, if you'll bear with me for one moment, so that I can get us started. And yes, thank you so much. So the conversation today already exceptionally exciting. Very excited to hear about OECD's work in the rubric development space. And towards the end of my talk, we'll get to some of the work that we've done here in terms of rubrics. I want to make sure, are you all seeing are you seeing the slide? We do see your notes. We see your notes as well. So it might be a different setting. Yeah, we're going to stop that and we're going to share again. How are we now? Better? Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so yes, the conversation today looking at designing curriculum to develop the skills really that our graduates and our future citizenry needs for future work and life. So I want to just start the conversation and give you a very quick background on the organization that I have the pleasure of representing here today. Actually, within the last year, we've gone through a name change. We were the Association of American Colleges and Universities. We are now the American Association of Colleges and Universities, with a very explicit reason for changing the name. That being that we actually have a very healthy contingency of international members, and wanted the name to better reflect that. As an organization, we are one of the higher education membership organizations based in the United States in Washington, D.C. Others you may be familiar with, the American Council on Education, groups of that nature. The thing that makes AAC&U unique is that we are not sector specific. So if you're familiar with the higher education system in the United States, you know we have public universities supported by individual states within the country, like my alma mater, Virginia Tech. We have a healthy, robust system of private institutions, you know, places like Harvard, Wellesley, et cetera, as well as our career, community, and technical colleges. So two-year institutions that are often an on-ramp to a baccalaureate degree and further educational attainment, as well as workforce development. We as an association are united by an idea, and it's the very idea that all students, regardless of where they go for their degrees, have the right to an education that we refer to as a liberal education, that does not have political connotations in our discussions. It's really that notion of breadth and depth. So the technical training, the in-depth studies within, you know, an academic program of study, a major, as well as broader exposure to both disciplines as well as the transdisciplinary essential learning outcomes that we heard discussed earlier today. So wonderful to hear another organization focusing on things like creative thinking and critical thinking. So you'll see references to that as we move forward. One of the things we're known for that I thought might be helpful is our regular surveying of employers. I will say primarily employers within a North American context, although many of those that are in our survey are indeed global in their reach. Fortune 500 companies, it's hard to isolate employers these days in terms of nationality in the span, particularly our industries that have come to the fore over the last couple of years, the technology space, all of those places, that we hear in the news from Silicon Valley, pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing. But what I think we hear from employers, which will have maybe some slight nuanced differences in terms of ranking of outcomes of what we heard from the previous presentation from the 2018 survey, is that these truly are the hallmarks of what employers are looking for in terms of student and graduate preparation, above and beyond the notion of narrow disciplinary training, narrow technical training. So one of the things that we hear, at least in the States quite frequently, is the notion that college, universities are not doing their jobs today. There's a significant questioning of the value of a degree, particularly the time, the sunk resources that can entail for individuals, for state-supported systems, et cetera. But in general, what we found in our survey is that actually the majority of the employers do have quite a lot or a great deal of confidence in higher education writ large. They have some concerns that we'll get to in terms of preparation, but overall, what we are still seeing is that the notion of going to college, whether it's for an associate's or a baccalaureate degree, is still seen as the first step, perhaps stepping stone, the entry point to not only a job, but a thriving career with our employers. In this survey that was conducted in 2020, we released the results in 2021, we asked all employers who respond to rank what we refer to as the essential learning outcomes. So back in the early 2000s, the organization AAC&U did a kind of a crowdsourcing activity with colleges and universities, asking them about the skills and abilities that they worked to foster in their students through their curriculum, their programs. And then we test that list for its importance with employers. And what you see on the left-hand side are the results, the top 5 from 2018, contrasted with 2020. And what you see there is really just some shifting in priorities, but in general, similar themes. In 2020, the ability to work in teams came as the top priority, the most critical learning outcome, according to our employers, followed by critical thinking, ability to analyze and interpret data, really pertinent for our conversation today, the notion of application of knowledge in real world settings, and digital literacy. We also ask our employers about what we've come to refer to as the mindsets and dispositions that they're looking for from college graduates as they enter the workforce. So those things that are perhaps more non-cognitive, more affective or behavioral skills, orientations and abilities. And you'll see there that, the list that we asked of the employers and how they ranked them. The first 65% saying very important that there's a sense of drive and work ethic, that graduates have the ability to take initiative, self-confidence in what they know, and honestly also the ability to say what they don't know, and test the boundaries of their expertise, this notion of persistence and self-awareness. So you see the list there. I won't read it all to you, but just, you get down towards the quote unquote bottom of that list, still with 50% saying that it's very important that college graduates possess this, notions of empathy, notions of curiosity for lifelong learning, this notion that there's some intrinsic motivation, interest in the things, again, beyond technical skills. Overall, what we found through our survey work is that employers valued the completion of active and applied learning experiences while students were still in college. So when you think of designing your curricula, thinking about what opportunities there are between, for example, 2 tests and a final in a particular class in your program, what opportunities there are beyond the 4 walls of your in-person classroom space, or your virtual classroom space. We found that the most popular experience in terms of an applied opportunity, according to our employers, not surprisingly, an internship or apprenticeship. There's more of a, from an employer perspective, kind of a one-to-one relationship there between what an internship and apprenticeship might look like and the future employment conditions. But those were not the only valued applied learning experiences. So for example, we found that while internships were the most frequently cited as what would make them more likely to consider hiring a candidate, still experiences involving working in community settings with people from diverse backgrounds or cultures, a work study or other form of employment during college. So just that notion of, at least in the States, we have many students, the majority of students actually, who work 1, sometimes 2 jobs while they are students at our institutions. Those may not be labeled as internships or apprenticeships as such, but the notion that students have actually had work experience is something that employers are looking for. Another aspect of the curriculum that employers value when it comes to being more likely to consider hiring a candidate is students' development of a portfolio of work that showcases their skills and actually integrates and helps demonstrate the integration of learning in a particular discipline, learning within the classroom, and then the experiences beyond the classroom, both at campus and out in the world. Last, you'll see the importance of the notion of a global learning experience, be that a study abroad experience where we have students leaving their home institution to go live and potentially work at another institution, or just the globalization of experiences back home, which is increasingly important in terms of access and equity for our students. What is reassuring about the surveys is that, contrary to what sometimes our parents think, if we're talking traditional age students, and sometimes our students think, is that employers do indeed value both breadth and depth when it comes to long-term career success. Sometimes we'll have students have very naive perspectives on what to major in. You know, I'm going to major in business because I will get a job, as opposed to thinking more holistically about the attributes they need to bring to the table and the training they can receive beyond a single academic program. Again, you'll see some of the things that our employers cited as very important for students and graduates to be able to do. You know, things like having students be able to think for themselves, that colleges are producing versatile students who can adapt to problems as they arrive, adequately building technical skills for employment. So, you know, nowhere in this conversation are employers or is AAC&U advocating for the jettisoning of the technical training. But the idea is that's a base minimum. Our employers are telling us that they expect, depending on the job, that the baseline technical specific training for a particular field will be there at that entry level. But beyond that, there are really critical pieces that have to be layered and folded into the student's experience and portfolios from a skills-based perspective for these graduates to ultimately be successful. And that's actually where I want to take the conversation now. So as confident as our employers are in overall when it comes to just asking about higher education writ large, you know, as articulate as they have been in terms of the skills, the dispositions, the mindsets that they think graduates need to be successful, and they've identified pieces of things we already do that they find relevant and valuable in terms of their screening of potential hires and what will make them more likely to hire someone. They do indeed see room for improvement when it comes to the preparation of graduates, when when they think about those individuals joining their companies. So a couple of pieces of data I'll share there, then transition into, okay, what does this mean for us and what can we do with it? Overall, what was interesting, and I should say, when we surveyed employers, we had a sample that segmented what we refer to as the C-suite group. So executives at the CEO, chief operating officer, chief information, chief technology officer, as well as hiring managers. And one of the things we were looking for, both the 2018 survey when we did this in 2020, was if there was divergence between those two groups within our sample. While there were on some questions here and there, overall there was pretty good congruence in their answers, and particularly in this area. So generally speaking, employers give us higher marks for preparing students for entry-level positions, so onboarding them into that first job, that first rung on the ladder of their organization. When it comes to how we have prepared students for advancement or promotion, there's mixed results. There's less confidence in what it is that we are doing organizationally. And our hypothesis at AAC&U is that this has to do with the skills gap that our employers are identifying for us. So just taking the top skills in terms of employers' ranking of them in terms of importance, I wanted to give you just a little bit of a snapshot here of the gaps that we're seeing reported to us by employers in terms of preparedness. So if work effectively in teams, 62% said this was a skill that was very important for them as they were looking at new hires. However, only 48% said that they felt recent college graduates were very well prepared to do that. Critical thinking skills, our largest gap, 60%. This is very important. 39% say that they're very well prepared. Analyze and interpret data, 57 of 41. digital literacy, 55 to 49. So you get the idea here, is that there's a space for work and improvement when it comes to these broader skills, dispositions, and abilities. And so with that, I want to think back and recenter us on the notion of, okay, well, what do we do with this and why are we here? So as educators, it's helpful for me, and I'm going to apologize, I'm definitely going into my educational psychology framework here, and ed psych speak a little bit. Halpern and Hackle in 2003 had a wonderful article in one of the higher education magazines here in the States called Change Magazine, where they distilled at that time what was known from the learning sciences writ large, cognitive psychology, human computer interaction, educational psychology, to say, okay, this is what we know about how humans make meaning and how learning happens from a scientific perspective. How do we translate that into action when it comes to, actual practice in the classroom? And one of the things they posited was, well, we need to step back and talk about really just what's the overall purpose of college teaching. And this challenges a bit that notion of content coverage, right? So they posit that the purpose of college teaching is actually twofold: long-term retention, and then the holy grail of educational activity, transfer. And so I want us to reframe our thinking as we think about, like, what do we do next with this to enhance our students' attainment of and facility with the essential learning outcomes. This notion that, when we shift our attention to this notion of, okay, our priority is really ensuring that our students will not only recall, but recall accurately and use appropriately the things from our discipline, from our classrooms, from the experiences we design in some new context, at some future, point that we can't necessarily even envision. Think about all the jobs that exist today that didn't 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when we were all finishing school. What does this do, and how does this maybe change our classroom behavior, our design of pedagogy, and honestly, even our design of the curriculum? Because one of the things I think can start wrapping our heads around is, just this notion of processing. And what we as humans process, we learn. So, there's the cognitive aspects of things, and that's often where we focus most of our attention when it comes to higher ed and our curricular design. But really, we're talking about a range of processing, behaviorally, affectively, socially, and these aren't segmented or segregated from one another. There's overlap here, and there's combining of things here. But often when I'm doing faculty development exercises and I'm talking to faculty very specifically about how do you incorporate more critical thinking into your disciplinary content, how do you get students doing more applied learning? We recognize learning is hard. Learning is a change that occurs over time, and it's really something that the student themselves is responsible for. So as the faculty member, where should I devote my attention? I've had many faculty say to me, well, I can't make students learn. And they're right. You can't make someone learn. However, what you can do is help facilitate the processing that you're looking for and direct the processing. So this simple equation that I hang my hat on in terms of organizing my thinking and the work that we can do is this notion of strategies plus processing equals the learning. What we want to have happen is to have our students processing in such a way that it's directed towards the very outcomes we've defined for them. Make no mistake, students are processing and making meaning in your class, in your experiences, through your curriculum, 24/7. The question is, are they processing in such a way that it's getting them to the outcomes that we've promised them, that our brochures have assured them they will achieve when they're with us, and that employers are looking for us to deliver? Well, where we can hang our hats is actually on the strategies, everything from, tweaking our assignments and our pedagogical design. We heard that wonderful discussion in the previous session about what was done with the Meerkats assignment, all the way up through how we actually design the sequencing of the experiences the students are going to take with us. So in essence, really what we're talking about is thinking through our strategies. And if employers are asking us for these skills, one of the things we need to start thinking about is perhaps reorganizing, perhaps trying new strategies, perhaps in some instances it's tweaking, in others it may be, a wholesale revision of some of the approaches that we may be taking to ensure that our students are actually having the opportunities to develop the essential learning outcomes that employers want, that parents are speaking to, and that frankly our society is going to be demanding, where students have deep and flexible knowledge that they can pull out and use in unique, novel, new situations that are new to them to be successful in career, work, and life. And so with that, I want to talk about one of the frameworks that AAC&U has developed that can help with organizing your thinking around what you do at the curricular level, as well as, within drilling down, literally down to the assignment level. One of our signature initiatives is VALUE. I'm the executive director of VALUE, and VALUE is an acronym which stands for Valid Assessment of Learning in Undergraduate Education. VALUE is really a system of approaches based on a suite of rubrics for these essential learning outcomes. Because one of the challenges that I often hear from faculty is, okay, I know critical thinking when I see it. Creativity is essential to my discipline, but how do I break it down and talk about it with students in a way that's digestible? And then furthermore, how do I assess it and measure it in ways that I can translate that data into evidence that other constituencies, policymakers, parents, employers will see as valid, and often, at least in the United States, as valid as the testing modalities that we've come to rely upon, where we're challenging the notion that a standardized test is the gold standard for having evidence of student learning. So as I mentioned, we have a suite of value rubrics. These are open educational resources, freely available from our website. You can download them at any time. They are available in Word and PDF for download, specifically so that you can customize them and make them appropriate to your culture and context. They are designed to provide an opportunity for direct assessment, looking at measurement over time. So for example, if you look at the rubrics when you download one and you say this would be hard to translate into an assignment level tool for giving students feedback, you're absolutely right. These have been written at that program assessment level, where you would be using opportunities from different classes to really look at patterns of learning in a class or a program and translate that into evidence of achievement, to think about changes at the curricular level, at the program level, even sometimes at the institutional level is how we're seeing them be used. The idea is that you marry one of these rubrics with an existing assignment that a faculty member has designed. So we talk about these tools as having embedded faculty expertise in the DNA of these tools. So each of these rubrics was created by a team of faculty, first created 2007, 2008, released in 2009. We have rubrics for all of the outcomes that you see here. So some of the usual suspects: critical thinking, written communication, quantitative literacy, and then others that often people will say are unaccessible, which I beg to differ. But you're assessing different things with them. So for example, we actually have a rubric for lifelong learning. The attributes of it I love as an educational psychologist because they contain things like reflection, transfer, curiosity, independence. We have a rubric for critical thinking, a rubric for intercultural knowledge and competence, civic engagement, something that's increasingly valued or at least raised up again as a value of higher education here in the States. Since they've been around since 2019, but we've been keeping more reliable statistics on it since 2009, more reliable information on our download count since 2014. As of our board meeting in September, 710,000 individual rubrics have been downloaded by about 2,800 colleges and universities across 153 countries. They've already been translated into Japanese. There's an effort to translate them into Chinese, into Arabic, and Spanish. They've actually permeated on some smaller scale K through 12 conversations, where we're seeing some independent high schools here in the States look at these tools as potential alternatives for AP measurement, advanced placement measurement of student learning, which gives college credit. And there's actually even an alternative high school in Chennai, India, that used the value rubrics as the foundation for developing their college preparation curriculum. What's important to know about these tools is while they do have an accountability they can serve a purpose with accountability issues here in the States. Accreditation is a huge thing that our institutions deal with, whether it's professional accreditation like ABET or regional accreditation, which all institutions that receive federal US dollars have to achieve. But really what we're talking about here is a pedagogical innovation that has assessment potential. It has to marry with how faculty are thinking about teaching and learning in their classrooms and the design of their curriculum. As part of the work that we do with Value, we have actually set up a system where institutions can send samples of student work so that they can not only score them with their own faculty back home using the rubrics, they can send a sample of their student work to us for external validation, where then faculty who have been trained in our method of scoring to ensure things like inter-rater reliability will then lend their eyes and their expertise to evaluating the student work. We have all of this available on our website. I'm going to stop my sharing here so I can see you and see the screen, and say that I think one of the biggest things when it comes to our thoughts on what are the implications of all of this in terms of curricular design. The best way that I have found to talk about this with faculty here in the States and in presentations like this is that I think first and foremost that we as educators need to engage in what I'll refer to as epistemological openness, to thinking through what it is that our students need and frankly, what our disciplines actually afford as opportunities for enhancing students' intellectual development. None of us found our disciplines because of a narrow outlook on what those disciplines mean or achieve. Sometimes as we distill things down to a more novice level, to prepare them in a way to translate them for our students, what we leave aside in that distillation is actually the exciting complexity that is probably what attracted us to our particular field or focus. And so this openness to thinking about how do we take our discipline, how do we translate it, how do we know critical thinking is involved in our spaces, but how do we make that explicit and instantiate it for our students?
Exactly, yes. I have a question for you, Dr. Kate. Thank you for the presentation. Like how the higher education institutes would work with the private sector, let's say, or other stakeholders like industry to co-create the curricula in order to have the set of skills and to have the more readiness for the students for the job relevant, let's say, discipline.
Sure. So I think we have excellent examples of that in the States, very specifically with our community colleges that tend to be more nimble and focused on the individual workforce. And there might be parallels in other systems to more of that kind of technical training, the technical schools that you might have. Where I think we have seen increasingly some excellent examples of how this work can be achieved in more traditional higher ed spaces is through the partnering on both kind of helping provide real world scenarios that can be embedded within courses, as well as then partnering to offer really robust internship experiences. And this is actually where I think coming out of COVID, as necessity breeds invention, we've seen corporations rethink what an internship experience might entail. So often we're worried about students having the resources to take advantage of getting to the physical location of an internship, be it, with a financial firm in New York or a technology firm in Palo Alto, that implicates cost and travel and can privilege, geographic location or families of a certain socioeconomic standing. But what we have found is that many companies have been much more nimble because they also are interested in diversifying their workforce and offering, well-structured remote opportunities that focus on kind of project-based work, as opposed to, frankly, I think the intentionality that's required with some of those online or virtual experiences has actually enhanced them.
Yes.
And frankly, in some ways made them better than the in-person internships, where often the assumption is, well, if they come to the office and they're here, they're just by osmosis going to get all of this great workforce experience.
Course,
I mean,
yes.
one of the things we know from our students is there's a real mix in terms of the design of internships. So I think that faculty have the opportunity, even those who are in fields that do not necessarily immediately sound like they equate to a particular job or industry, to help students see the skills that they're developing. I think the skills gap that we see from the employer surveys often is actually a translation gap, where students don't necessarily have the vocabulary to say, in this experience in my college, in what I did, I developed these critical thinking skills, or I worked on teams and developed my skills in this way, as part of the interview context or the onboarding.
Sorry for interrupting. I have this question related maybe to the set of skills that I believe you showed it on your screen when between 2018 and 2020, the priority of the skills has been changed. Like, for example, the critical thinking has been more priority. Do you have any justification on why those set of skills has changed between the 2 years and they were before the pandemic? So is there any justification?
I don't, and I'll be honest with you, if I showed you the full, and I can make available the link to the full report so you can take a look at it. What's interesting is the difference. So that ranking is in some ways a little bit misleading, in the sense that the percentage differences in those rankings is quite small. When it comes to, the prioritization. I mean, the majority, we gave them, for lack of a better word, a veritable laundry list of skills. There were at least 20 that they were looking to rank. With the exception of one skill, 50%, over 50% for each of them said this is very important. So employers want all of this from us, which, on some level is hard to navigate. So, looking at the top skills, I think the consistency of what stays near the top is probably a more important thing to look at than the percent differences between what was, maybe first one year and third the next, because the distance between the priorities there is quite small.
Thank you, Dr. Kate. We want to thank you for your insightful presentation, and we want to move to our next speaker now. Please welcome Laura Ibra, is an academic researcher at the Baden-Württemberg Comparative State University in the Department of Educational Management and Lifelong Learning in Karlsruhe, Germany. She is a member of the Next Education Research Team led by Professor Dr. Daniel Ehler. As a doctoral candidate, she is in the collaboration with the TU Dresden. She conducts research in the field of transformative and participatory future skills in higher education. After her binational bachelor's degree in European media and culture, her master's degree in children's and youth media, she worked at KIKA, the children's TV channel of ARD and ZDF in Germany, as well as in teaching and consulting in the field of migration, language, and education. She continued to produce podcasts and radio features on topics such as the future of higher education and sustainability. Her main research interests cover the future of higher education, education for sustainable development, student engagement and participation, future skills and competences, and future skills in global higher education. Dr. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a great
pleasure
honor.
To have you.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I think you can see my presentation now. Is that the case? Wonderful. Okay, thank you for the introduction as well. You've already heard a little bit, which also will guide you a little bit into the direction of which perspective I will be speaking today, which is on one side as a PhD researcher and on the other side also as a researcher at a research team in a specific university in Germany, which I will also shortly present to you. For a start, just a short overview of what I will be presenting to you today. So the subject which has been assigned to my slot is actually the role of higher education bridging current and future skills gaps. And I think we've had a lot of indications to that already in the presentation before, which was very interesting to me. And actually, for answering these, I will also ask a lot of questions in order to inspire discussion on the subject. So we will do a little interactive survey, which I'm very curious about because we're a big group of many countries participating, I think. I will introduce our future skills approach and definition and give some insights into our own future skills research, and then come to the question of how higher education can actually promote future skills learning. And then we'll have some questions. Yeah, just a short look into our research and our research group. As already announced, the research group is called Next Education and led by Ulf Daniel Ehlers, who's the head of research here. And our research focus is on teaching and learning on the transformation of educational organizations and processes, also considering lifelong learning processes under conditions of an increasingly digitalized world. So it's really about the transformation of higher education, and of course, digitalization is a big subject. Our institution, you can see it's in Germany, in the southwest of Germany. It has a very long name, which you don't have to memorize. But what is interesting about it, it's this region is very powerful economically. So we have a lot of history in engineering, for example. But our institution is specific in that it is the first German higher education institution offering degree programs with an integrated on-the-job training. So we are a dual education. So we have kind of a vocational focus also in higher education, and our students usually do 3 months on the job, and then they come to our institution to have some theoretical input. And we think that this is a great way to also acquire future skills if this integration is actually done in the right way and reflected on.
Dr. Laura, if I will just interrupt you, but to manage the time, we will have like 10 minutes allocated for your presentation, if you don't mind.
Okay, then I will speed up a little bit. Okay, in the chat, I will actually put a little link. We will have a look at it shortly in the end, because I'm really curious about your opinion. Because one of the points I would like to raise is what the role of higher education and future skills promotion is also to reflect on what future skills matter and why. So I would like to ask you what you think are the most important future skills that higher education should promote. So I will leave that for 10 more seconds. You have the link in the chat. You can use a QR code, and we will shortly have a look at it in the end to see like a little panorama of future skills from the group. Okay. Because time is tight, I will move on with future skills. I think we've already discussed this also probably in the former sessions, that there are a lot of challenges ahead which ask us to think about and discuss future skills needs. I don't need to list them. There's a pandemic, climate change, wars, poverty, human rights issues, etc., etc. So we have a lot of changes happening all the time. We can say that change is the new normal, but I think there's a question also threatening, which is, are we heading towards some kind of disruption? How can we get this into our hands actually, and not only react, but shape and design change and transformation? Or put in more philosophical terms, maybe could we get from crisis to crisis? Could we get away from that and move towards utopia? So that's some questions we should have in mind when talking about future skills. Future skills, we always talk about it, but of course there are other terms related to it, such as 21st century skills, transferable skills, etc., etc. And they all, of course, go into the debate of future skills. But what is specific, of course, in future skills is really the future aspect that we have. So the future here is central. We don't only talk about skills and competences that students need for today, but for the future. In our research, the definition we give to future skills, it's pretty theoretical. So we define future skills as competences that allow individuals to solve complex problems in highly emergent contexts of action, a self-organized way, and enable them to act successfully. The rest is a little bit like what goes into the competences. So we have values in there, we have motivation, etc. But what is important here, first of all, is that they prepare us for emergent futures. We cannot foresee the challenges in the future, so we must acquire skills that help us master these futures, and that master is in a way that we can actually act successfully. So action competence is also a very central thing in our definition. There are other definitions. The first one, for example, it's a bit more employability related. It's capacities and knowledge that we need for the working lives, and the OECD, which I'm very happy that we have in this session as well. There we have like a broader perspective towards the future, individual and collectively. That's also a difference, that we not only consider individuals, but also collectives. We have a lot of frameworks going on, and they often talk about future skills, but we realized when analyzing them that they don't always talk about the same future skills and approaches. It's not always the same thing. So in an analysis that was conducted, we see that often future skills are equated to digital skills. They often have a employability focus, and they are not always theoretically funded. So we did a lot of comparisons, and also we did our own research, which I want to shortly present. It was based, first of all, on an analysis of actually companies. That's, I think, where we also have like the world of work coming in, that have future skills concepts in them. So we chose some of them and conducted some interviews in order to define what they think are the future skills most important for students and graduates to master the challenges of tomorrow. From that, we defined 17 future skills profiles that we can have a short look at. And also there was a Delphi study conducted with experts, international experts, on what are drivers for change in higher education. So what will the future challenges of higher education be? So some insights, a model that we have is placing the individual in three relations, which is to myself, to some development with objects, and to the world with my environment. So we defined 17 profiles, which were the ones, they amalgate several competences in them and have a specific name. You can have a look at them on our website if you want to have a closer look, but you can already see that some are really future oriented. For example, we have like a future design competence. We also have ambiguity competence. And I think what we also heard before in the presentation, we also have ethical competence. And yeah, 17 profiles, but they may seem a lot, but one of our missions is also that it's maybe not about the singular profiles the whole time, but it's what we do with them. And some might matter more in a specific context, and some might matter less. Some might matter more individually, and some might matter more in a collective setting. So that's also something that we need to discuss and reflect on. On our research, you can read mostly in open access. You can find it on our website, nextskills.org. But yeah, I want to move on to the question of how to promote future skills in higher education. So we actually do that in a lot of initiatives. I don't want to present them all, but they already show that there are a lot of different approaches of how to do that. So of course, we have the Next Skills approach where we do research on it, but we also have like something called Duc2R, where we try to get future skills into our curricula by really combining theory and praxis and bringing them closer together in our institutions. We have one focusing on blockchain skills, which is really a project related closely to the world of work. We have one which is focusing on future research skills, and one on future teaching skills. So all of that is some kind of future skills promotion in higher education, which already shows that there's no one approach that we can take. And also a question that we should ask, and which I'm asking as well, is who actually defines which future skills matter? Is it employers? Is it the youth? which will be very important in the future, of course, and which has a big say, or should have a big say, in defining what future skills matter. Is it recent challenges and crisis, or is it future challenges? And is it societies? Is it us who defines? And what do we need these future skills for? So these are questions we should ask. And the questions going after that is also, how can we not only react to crisis, but really co-create together, create and transform? And how can we learn and teach this? Because these are complex challenges. So of course, it must be very complex to learn and teach them. And what can or should we expect from higher education there? As said, I'm raising a lot of questions. Some impulses are that we don't only focus on the world of work and its changing demands, but also on global and societal issues. For example, some frameworks are also focusing on sustainability issues, on global competences and skills. And of course, we have the Sustainable Development Goals that might lead us towards defining what future skills matter in our teaching approaches. And then another important question is our future skills something I should acquire as an individual in order to be competitive in the future? Or is it something that really needs to be acquired with others together? Because probably the challenges of the future have to be solved together, interdisciplinarily, for example. So we could say that higher education should support students in becoming social artists. As said in our study, we also defined some future scenarios where higher education is probably going to go. And this is also related to future skills and the role of higher education. So we will have a trend of universities becoming towards lifelong learning. So not only a specific time after before graduation of students and between high school and graduation. We will probably have more tendencies towards personalization of university so that I can define what I want to learn and have more options. We will probably have a stronger focus on future skills, of course, and also we will probably have more networks and not only be in one university for a couple of years and then graduate from there. These are some scenarios that we should also keep in mind. We actually looked out for examples because we realized there's actually a lot going on already, and maybe not everything has to be reinvented in order for future skills promotion in higher education. So we have, for example, in Europe, we have the European Universities Initiative, where a lot of universities come together and focus on specific subjects. And some of them are really going into how can we make students acquire skills for transforming the world into a more sustainable and just place, for example. We have the 42 Coding School, which really has a specific approach of choosing students and of already there promoting their future skills development. The Team Academy is focusing on entrepreneurship. We have service learning as an approach. On the left-hand side, for example, you can see that we are developing materials where we can really include future skills and raise awareness for them in courses that we are doing. For example, there's a card game and we are developing a platform that other teachers can also get inspiration from, etc., etc. So there's actually a big breadth of examples and practices where future skills promotion is already happening. And our approach is also that it can be a very small thing where we start to promote future skills in higher education. But it can also, of course, be a very big concept where we have guidelines coming from higher education institutions or networks, etc. And both are good because both help us move forward. And on all levels of higher education, we should find ways and just try out also to promote future skills in higher education. So actually to see like what didactical and pedagogical approaches could be, there's a lot going on, and there's still some research going on, because the question now doesn't seem to be anymore, are future skills important or not? I think we have a consensus on that, but the question seems to be now, how can we really promote them, and what is our role as higher education institutions for them? So some approaches are amalgamated here, like design thinking, that we have some practice experience in our student experiences, some challenge-based learning or problem-based learning. Teachers should become more teachers, coaches, and students more experts. There's the aspect of transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinary, etc., etc. I think getting into a debate about that will also help us move forward and also make conscious what we already do in that respect. And in the former session, I think we also have the question of how to make higher education not only future ready, but also inclusive and participatory, because that goes together for future skills promotion. We are just preparing a publication, actually, a practice book where we really tried to collect some examples from all over the world of future skills in practice, how it's actually done already in higher education. And with this, we really want to inspire and raise awareness for future skills promotion and exchange practices. Yeah, so this is, I hurried up a bit. So I think I made the most important questions, because I think it's really about getting into the discussion and in the debate and really exchange on what is important for us, what matters for us, and do that with the students as well, because they will have their own view. And what we think is really important for future skills promotion is that in order to learn them, you need to know that they are important for you and for your future. So that's something I would like to put the accent on. And before we go into the discussion, I would just love to have a look at our survey that we've had. And then I would like to thank you for the attention. And you can still participate. The most important future skills that higher education should promote. And we have creativity and critical thinking are the biggest ones, which means that this is the highest amount of people that chose them. Thank you very much.
Is it because of the two previous speakers talked about creativity and critical thinking? Most probably.
Probably, yeah. Which already shows that future skills that matter are also context dependent as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Laura, for such an amazing presentation, and I wish all the best of luck in this study. I'm looking forward also to read the book that is about to be published. I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Like if we are talking about the, let's say, the future job relevant skills, and what are the still lacking from your opinion that the graduates already, they don't have it?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think in many surveys that we see, we have a lot of more technical skills. And of course, like, for example, often focusing on digitalization, as I mentioned before, they will tell us that they lack, for example, in artificial intelligence related skills or programming, coding, etc. But we also see that these surveys, they focus on current demands and current skills gaps. And we cannot really foresee, we can foresee part of it for the next year, what skills we will need, more technical skills. But our survey showed that really employers also said like, okay, this can be acquired in a way, it's very important. But in order to master the future challenges, we really need students to develop skills to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty and future challenges. So in our research, we saw that our competences in our framework, they go beyond the technical skills, but they can build upon them. For example, when we have the example of artificial intelligence, we will have ethical competences as a future skills profile, which is based on knowledge of artificial intelligence, but
at the same time.
Yeah, we'll go beyond that. So that's a specific perspective that we are taking, but we think that this is a very important perspective to really have that ambiguity and emergence in mind when talking about future skills.
If we are going to highlight like key micro or macro level challenges that embed the higher education's ability to provide the future skills required for the job market.
So, yeah. as we've seen, like the change is happening already on many levels. So I think the fact that we're talking now in this very international session about future skills shows that there's already a lot going on different levels. So we will have the micro level, we will have teachers trying out new things and talk about future skills maybe in their classes with students. We actually have student initiatives who say, like, we don't learn what we need for the future, so they will actually build their own curricula and bring it in through the institution's curricula. That's also a good example. Then, of course, for example, our university has recently launched a new mission in really promoting sustainability and also the related skills. So there we have an initiative which will really foster that everybody will talk about it, not only some innovators or some that think that it really matters. And of course, then we have the policy level, which is also on an international level. And I think, for example, that international organizations here do a lot of inspirational work and a lot of exchange, open up a lot of room for exchange. And I think that's really something where that goes together, where that comes together, that individuals who want to promote that get also the idea that they are not the only ones going into that direction, but they can do it together. And I think that's very important to have these rooms where all these levels can come together.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Laura, for your time and sharing this valuable information with us. Now we'll move to our last speaker for today's panel, Dr. Samira Al-Mulla. She's the director of the Certificate Equivalency and the acting director of the Academic Planning Department at the Ministry of Education, UAE. Dr. Al-Mulla earned her PhD in computer engineering from Khalifa University, and she's specialized in digital forensics. Currently, Dr. Al-Mulla is a board member of Emirates Science Club, and she has a number of publications in prestigious conferences and scientific journals. Dr. Al-Mulla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Hind, and thank you for the speakers in this panel. I'll try to make it even shorter than Laura. Okay.
Thank you.
So, okay. So the topic that I'm going to talk today about is about the new degrees, ensuring diplomas meet the needs of emerging industries. New degrees, to some extent, for the professionals who are in the education, will find it a little bit inconvenient because there is nothing called new degrees. It's, I think it's the programs that need to be, there need to be an evolution in the programs and redesigning and revamping to generate the final result, which is a degree or diploma. So the trick here is that the program itself rather than the diploma. So having said that, I'll move to the next slide. So what we are going to cover today, when we are saying new degree, this means that we are talking about the future. So I think to some extent, you will find some of the reflections of Laura's presentation in mine, even though we never spoke before. But it's strange that you will find some reflections. So imagining future universities and degrees perception. This will lead us to talk about future universities. What are the plausible scenarios and future industry demands? The degree perception. What's the current perception and the difference between bundled versus unbundled degrees? And finally, I'm going to give a glimpse about and snapshot about the UAE higher education sector, the current and future vision and goals. So I'll try to make it very concise, as I said at the beginning. So are we ready for any professional, in education, in any sector? If we are going to think and design something for the future, first, let us live in that future. So if you close your eyes and you open it and you find yourself in 2050 with a population around or more than 9 billion people, with nations colonizing Mars, intelligent robots work alongside people, and the largest technology company is investing hugely in the education business. Are we ready for that future? So this is very critical. If we want to have this type of future or this world in future, are we ready today? Did we set the policies today to reach this type of or this world of the future? So in order to help us in imagining how we can live the future of the desired higher education world, actually in the literature, we will find a lot of future foresight scenarios and techniques used to identify what are the plausible scenarios for future foresights in higher education. I came across this report about can the universities of today lead learning for tomorrow? And actually, I intentionally kept it as is, because it's very informative, very insightful, and it's around major axes to come up with the plausible scenarios. As our majority will know that when you are doing the future foresight exercise, you have to go over the mega trends, and then you have to identify the main two with high priority mega trends that will affect your future world. And that's why it's different from linear or strategic planning. So these scenarios were designed around main two axes, the government and degrees. The variation was in the control, or let's say the hands-on and the activity of the government within the higher education business. And the degree varies between bundled and unbundled degrees. When I'm saying unbundled degrees, means like micro-credentials, mostly and majorly it's about the micro-credentials and the continuous learning. When I'm saying bundled degrees, it's about the traditional or the existing ways of education and the degrees of existing system. So the result was 4 scenarios. The first one, Champion University, the base case. This means if we continue doing the same and linearly in 2050, for example, or 2030, we will reach to this world where universities depend a lot on the government and funding, and they are heavily dependent on bundled degrees. And if we, the likely case or the case that we would like the higher education to be in is in universities where they have their own income coming from partnership with industry. They have more self-dependent in terms of the financial aspect, and they have a hybrid or a combined type of programs and degrees. And they are very much close to the industry, and the students in this world will prefer to have work along with their education. The alternate case will be the disruptor universities. And this world, the government deregulates the sector to derive competition and efficiency. Again, less dependent on the government and highly dependent on unbounded degrees, more onto micro-credentials. The students of this world will be more in continuous learning mode. And finally, the virtual universities, the extreme case where government restructure the higher education to integrate university and vocational institutes, prioritizing training and self-learning. And this world will be, again, completely dependent on unbounded degrees. So these are 4 scenarios. And again, Laura, I have to mention you on this. I have again a mentee. If the audience allow us to take again scan this QR code, even if you are not within the UAE, you are from outside the UAE. If you don't yet understand the higher education business in the UAE, given the remarkable change that you hear about the improvement in UAE or the achievements in financial and tolerance and technology, where do you think that UAE higher education will be in 2050? Are we going to continue to be in the, I'll go back to the scenarios, so please write the scenario in the answer. Are we going to reach to a champion university? Are we going to be in scenario 1, or in the likely case, or the alternate case, which is scenario 3, or extreme case. So I hope the scenarios are clear, so you can add your answer there. So allow me also to move next, just because of the time constraint. So from today to future, these are the existing universities. Now let's imagine having a different type of university. By the way, the extreme university that mentioned, it's I don't think it's even far to have such university in the very near future. So we can have, for example, if we are going to have a future university, whether it's in cloud and the students are all over the world without any boundaries between the geographical boundaries, what are the factors that affect the future universities? The power shift, international competition, business faded boundaries, and technological evolution. So let's move to the evolution industry and the future trends of degrees. Main future mega trends, and as we know, these are, by the way, very good references if you want to know more about the mega trends. It can be either technological, social, environmental, economic, and political. And as you can see, when we did our literature review for an exercise for future foresight in education in UAE, we came across these are the main trends that will affect the education sector. And the arrows represent the uncertainty and impact. So the future degrees, the future learners, future teaching methods, and future universities will be affected. So how to bridge the gap? Existing structure of higher education programs and learning. From now, we do hear a lot that we need to redesign the tertiary programs, redesign the program to reduce the gap. We always hear this from the industry that the graduates from university they are not up to the level of the expectation by the industry. Encouraging higher education institutes toward independent of government fund. Again, this is, I think, by itself will be an achievement for the higher education. And it is important for the higher education sector or institutes to start moving toward this method to sustain in the future. Bundled versus unbundled degree, there are already huge debate, and we have Google, another technology, big technology company moving into the education sector, producing the micro-credentials, and they are not produced, it's there since a long time, but more emphasis on the need of micro-credentials. And in the literature, there had been always debate that bundled and unbundled, there need to be a hybrid or a balanced measure between the both type of degrees, and keeping in mind always the market need. Industry and university collaboration, as we said, majority of undergraduate students prefer integrated employment and education offering. Actually, from now we can see this like the good number of students who graduate from even the school, they prefer to do their undergrads while employing. So just a glimpse about higher education in UAE. As mentioned by His Excellency the Minister, and then by Dr. May also, in UAE there have been a report published, or a document published around the UAE future foresight, or the centennial of UAE. Education for future focused on advanced technology, ethical values, centric, learner-centric, continuous effort to discover gifted and talented learners, schools as a hub for entrepreneurs and innovation incubator, UAE universities as a hub for international research. In the Ministry of Education, our strategy for higher education is centered around the vision of the students and on the system level vision. So the student vision is centered around skills, knowledge, values, and anatomy. And in the system level, the innovation, relevance, quality, efficiency. And you can pick any of the projects, and it will fall under one of these visions. Again, continuing discussing the competitiveness of the UAE education. In the international global indexes, the UAE scored the highest in these indexes: Women with Degrees, University Education Index, Higher Education Achievements, and so on. And regionally also, we achieved the first, by the way, this is, I think it was late 2020, early 2021. First regionally in tertiary level inbound mobility, student mobility inbound, and globally we are first in level, tertiary inbound mobility. So I'm going to sum up. I try to make it very fast. And by the way, while other presenters were presenting, I was just deleting some of the slides because I know there is no time. So it is crucial to assess university leaders and government policymakers in planning now to deliver the education needs for students and employers tomorrow. Make the shift from being faculty-focused to learner-centric, integrate with industry to co-create and collaborate, reimagine the physical campus for a virtual world, experiment with unbundling degrees, programs, and deconstructing the value chain. And that's it from my end, Dr. Hind.
Thank you, Dr. Samira, for such a very quick and insightful presentation. I appreciate that you have went across the whole presentation very quickly. We didn't want to rush you, to be frank, but we have some questions around the degree. At the beginning, when you started, you said there is no degree, there is maybe a new academic program. But if there are a philosophical question, philosophical thought. Now, when we are talking about the degree, the diploma or the bachelor or master and PhD, would it be a new degree that will be in between, or some of those degrees will be removed and replaced by something else in the future?
I don't think if something exists to maintain the legacy of the education, the existing degrees need to sustain. However, there might be an introduction of the because when you think about the credential, it's either micro-credential or it's full credential. So you can place any sub-credential under micro-credential and any full credential under the bundled credential. So, and even in the current system, there are credentials or degrees in between master and PhD, in between bachelor and master, academic degrees, if I mention, or I can say academic degrees. And there also, if you talk about vocational, then this is again another word of qualifications. So having said that, I think it's very hard to say that any degree will vanish. Because again, you will find someone after 50 years who graduated in this time of the world, and they need to do something with their qualification.
Yes. Thank you. I have another question. Maybe it's the last question because of the time. Now, when you presented those 4 types of universities, let's say, and I find it quite interesting. But if we're talking about, like, if we want to meet the needs of the emerging industries in the future, which one of these types would you nominate or highlight?
Thank you, Dr. Hind. I would say the desired one, or the what we call them. Just I need to remember the names of the second scenario and the third scenario, where you will have, because no one can disagree that universities need to be independent somehow from in their decisions, or in the funding at least. Universities to produce patents, to produce more research, to handle more projects, they need cash coming in, right? So dependency on the government will always be I think it's burden. A barrier. Yes, burden and barrier for the universities. So I believe that moving toward universities, and by the way, we have in the Dubai government, they have these 9 clauses about the future of higher education, where there is clearly mentioning that the universities will be like a free zone. They need to act with the mindsets of free zones. So there is a debate to some extent about that, but from the financial perspective, I think to some extent it will provide independence for the universities. to produce more desirable outcome. And I can, going back to your question, I think scenario 2 and 3, but I can say that scenario 4, the extreme scenario, it's also very much possible.
Okay, so
but
this
I
is
don't
back
wish
again.
to be in scenario 1.
Yes, of course, but it's again back to the survey that you run. If you want to show the results.
Well, I think people were not that much يعني focused. So I have the result, but it's strange results. يعني, let's see it. I'll share the screen. It's scenario 3. Good you mentioned, because let me see.
I think it's a good scenario.
Yes.
At least I nominated that.
Okay, so I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can see it. Just 1 minute.
It's fine.
Okay. No, let me share it. Better to share at least to the
audience.
To the audience, yes. So let me share. So can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
So majority are seeing that we will be in scenario 3.
Okay. What do you think?
2 and 3 are the expected. Good, we see 4. This means people are believing
optimistic.
That we will, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Samira, for
You're
such an
welcome.
amazing presentation. Thank you for your time. Dear speakers, I would like to thank you all for your valuable information and sharing those insightful presentations with us. For our audience, we hope that it has provided a snapshot of how the higher education is shaping the future skills for work and life. On behalf of the organizing team at RCEP, we are looking forward to hosting you again tomorrow in the second day of the conference. Until then, enjoy your evening and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Dr. Han.
Thank you, Doctor.